You were unmuted.
So here we are on a Thursday afternoon, obviously under slightly different circumstances than normal. Everyone is tuning in, and I see Michael Calderwood down in the corner there. So Michael, instead of being in the back of the room, you're down in the corner. So thanks for joining in. And so everyone, welcome to this these unusual
Let's have me on mute because I don't get any voice. Mm-hmm. She must have me on mute. I think something popped up. She had me on mute.
Mr. Bruner, you're not on mute at this time. I can hear you talking.
I unmuted you.
I don't know.
All right, I'm going to endeavor to begin this meeting without further distractions. So let me just say this. Obviously, these are slightly different circumstances. Everyone is pretty much calling in home.
Okay, I just tried to unmute you a second time.
General Manager Weigold is down at the Vets Hall, and but other than that, we're all making a contribution and sheltering in place during these unusual times. So one of the, a few things are going to be different today, and one of those things is that we don't have a flag to salute. And I thought what we would do is, as of yesterday, West Virginia joined, and now every state in the union has reported at least one case of the coronavirus. So I thought that, and New York and California have more cases than anyone else. So I thought what we would do today, and I sent these lyrics out, or words, let's say, out to members of the board and other folks tuning in from the district. And I know other people that are out there would probably know these particular lyrics or words. But what we're going to do is recite the first few lines of Woody Guthrie's classic song, "This Land Is Your Land." This is going to be a slightly more nature-oriented way to remind ourselves that we have this collective experience of being citizens of this country that we call home at this time. And this is probably a good time to be relating, not just from a place of community and county and state, but with regard to the county, the country, we're all in this together. So for those of us that have the lyrics or just remember them, I'm going to begin reciting them right now, and you can join in if you wish. So here we are. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island. From the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream water. This land is made for you and me.
For you and me.
And we can never feel more blessed than we are right now during this challenging time of opportunity as well. So moving forward, we do have a quorum. All 5 members of the board are here. Legal Counselor Carmel, do we have anything to report from closed session? Tim? Oh, there he is. Tim, are you there? Well, at this moment, we don't seem to have Tim Carmel on the line.
We'll discuss labor negotiations, the general manager's
there we go.
Litigation cases.
Could you start from the beginning, Tim? I missed a little bit. I missed a little bit of what you said. Maybe everybody else did as well.
Hello?
Cool. There you are, Tim.
Hi. Sorry about that. Did anyone hear anything I said?
If you could just repeat what you said, that would be good.
Okay, the board discussed labor negotiations, the general manager's performance, and 2 pending litigation cases. There's no reportable action.
All right. Thank you very much. Anyone know, do we have any additions or deletions to the agenda? Not hearing or seeing anyone, we'll move on to public safety. And I believe that Commander Nelson has joined the meeting from his office, most likely. Commander Nelson, welcome aboard. Well, I see Commander Nelson's name up here on the screen. Commander Nelson, are you there? Haley, do you have any ideas why we might not be connecting with the commander at this time?
No, he's actually ready to speak. I don't have him muted.
So, you say that he's muted at this time, but he's ready to speak. Is that what I heard you say?
Yes.
Okay. So let me just ask you, Commander Nelson, are you there? If he is there, I'm having a little bit of difficulty hearing him.
I'm trying.
Thank you. I'll tell you, while we're doing that, why don't we move on to Chief Hollingsworth's report from the fire department. Chief, why don't you go ahead?
Where did you go?
Okay, there it is. Can you hear me now?
Is that you, Chief?
Yes, it is.
All right.
So, good afternoon. Obviously, there's going to be a couple of learning curves as we move through this process, but I think it'll be pretty good as we move forward. You have my report in front of you. The total number of responses for the month of February were 82. We're following into the same categories in regards to percentages. You will notice that I told you last month we're going to be adding additional information. You should have an extra statistics page there that qualifies the emergency responses by a number of different categories, not just the incidents by customer where you were looking for local versus non-local, but now you have a much better breakdown of when the calls are coming in, what time of day, time of week, and then how long we're actually committed to a lot of those calls on a regular basis. My intent is to expand this as we get more information and we glean that from the new system we're moving, but this is the kind of stuff you're going to be able to get in the future. So I'm excited to be able to provide that for you. And if you have any specific requests, as we learn more about the system, we'll be able to add that information as well. So please feel free to forward that to me. A specific update for you in regards to what the COVID-19 or coronavirus stuff is happening right now. Across the United States, there's 10,000, as of this morning, 10,755 confirmed cases with 154 confirmed fatalities. In California, it's just under 1,000 with 19 confirmed fatalities. And in San Luis Obispo County, there's only been 7 confirmed cases with no fatalities. That means we're having a little bit better recovery rate than was initially assumed, which is really good. And the vast majority of people that are either exposed or actually sick with coronavirus are self-healing at home, and very few are much fewer are impacting the system than we originally thought. The infection rate, the mortality rate are still up there. We're still concerned about that. But obviously all the issues that county public health and the state are suggesting are to slow that escalation curve, and they appear to be working. So we need to remain diligent in that. At the county level, the San Luis Obispo County Emergency Operations Center has been activated this last week. Those are participants from Office of Emergency Services, County Fire, CAL FIRE, the local fire departments, our EMSA, law enforcement, and public health. And the purpose for doing that is the coordinated effort and getting all that information out to the community. We're having daily conference calls and daily updates, and then all requests and ordering and any issues that come are all related through that one center. It's an easing of the process, if you will. As you've probably heard, the Public Health Department, through the Emergency Operations Center, has issued its most current directive, and that is the mandatory shelter in place, which goes into effect at 5 o'clock this evening. Again, all essential services will remain open, and that doesn't mean you can't leave your home. It just has to. You're supposed to be working within the confines of what that directive are. So, going to the doctor's office, going to the pharmacy, getting food, going to the store, those are all considered essential services. In regards to local stuff, you will notice that most of the departments within the CCSD have closed their doors. The fire department has as well. This is that we are shutting down all public events and we're doing essential response duties only. We are remaining fully staffed for all emergencies, and we have personnel on contingency to bring in more as necessary and if needed. Obviously, we're using universal precautions in regards to all of our patient contacts, not just those that we consider that are exposed. But that does mean that you may see some of my personnel dressed up like they're in hazmat suits, depending on the incident. Information about that has been pushed out on public media, and it is actually on our CCSD website as well. All the documentation we're getting from the county and from the state, we're putting on our website, so please feel free to check that. And if you look for more information, please, would be directed to go to either the readyslow.org, San Luis Obispo Public Health Department, and both the CDC and WHO are offering quite a bit of information as well. But we're putting all of that stuff on the CCSD website to make sure that we're getting that out to everybody who has any concerns. Over to you for any questions.
All right, Chief, before I ask one, does anyone on the board or staff have any comments or questions for the chief? Well, Chief, I'd like to ask you just for the mental and emotional well-being of the residents of Cambria. I believe of those 7 that you mentioned with regard to the so-called the cases, I say, that have been called to our attention with regard to people contracting the virus. I believe 3 of them are in the South County and 4 are in the North County, which would indicate that none are in the city of San Luis Obispo or along the North Coast. Is that correct?
That is initially the information we've been given. However, they are still trying to do some back tracing and confirming where those people were over the last number of days, because obviously if they did any traveling, there could potentially be exposures based on what their actions were. So right now they're still doing the back tracing and history taking on that. But as far as we've been told, there has not been any anything on the coast or north coast of the county so far.
Thankful for, and for the folks that have been diagnosed with having the virus, we wish them all the best of luck. That's for sure. Well, thank you, Chief, for your report. So, Haley, can we go back? Do we have Commander Nelson on the line now? Is he available?
President Farmer?
Yes.
I was just trying to adjust all of my tech stuff, and I did have an agenda change request. I just wanted to move 7D up toward the beginning of the meeting so that those interested parties might be able to attend and then get the
Okay, I can't imagine anyone would have any feelings otherwise. So is everyone okay with moving 7A up to the top of 7D, excuse me, up to the top of regular business?
No, I think we ought to move Mr. Bruno up also.
Okay, that's fine with me.
All right, so we'll do the auditor's report first, and then perhaps do 7D second, and then the other 2 items. So we'll thank you, Director Rice. Okay, so once again, Haley, do we have Commander Nelson on board?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right, thank you. So moving forward, obviously public comment is another situation that's going to be a little bit different. And I just want to make this comment that if anything is going to be missing from these meetings that we'll be doing apparently online in the foreseeable future, it's having people coming up to the podium. We have some knowledgeable and intelligent and thoughtful and thought-provoking comments that are being made by members of the community. And we won't necessarily have that opportunity to do that from now on into the foreseeable future. So this is something I'm going to miss, and I'm sure everyone else tuning in is going to miss as well. So let me just ask you, Haley, do we have any public comment there that you received an email?
Yes,
Yes, we have one public comment from Elizabeth Bettenhausen.
and it says, please be so kind as to tell the board of directors and the public this afternoon about this item in the expenditure report, page 21 of the agenda.
Excuse me, Haley.
John, I'm trying to make a motion.
I see General Manager. I believe
Yes,
our General
President
Manager
Farmer,
is
could I have
my attention. Mr. Weigold?
Yes, President Farmer, could I have all staff and board members mute their mics right now? Everybody's open.
Well, yeah, and so finally I had to call a couple.
I just muted David.
I'm still showing President Farmer open hot mic and Vice President Stidel hot. Oh, Vice President Stidel just went muted. Okay, I think we're good. Go ahead, Haley.
Okay. I have one public comment from Elizabeth Bettenhausen, and it says, good morning,
We
Pam.
gotta go. Hold on, Haley. Tim Carmel, hot mic. Can you mute Tim Carmel? Tim Carmel, can you hear us? If you can you mute your mic? Okay, we'll try it again, Haley. Go ahead.
Okay.
So I have one public comment for Elizabeth Bettenhausen that says, good morning, Pam. Please be so kind as to tell the board of directors and the public this afternoon about this item in the expenditure report,
Page
page 21 of the agenda.
What work
What did Todd do in December 2019 to earn this much money?
Thanks,
Thanks, Elizabeth.
We have a couple of raised hands.
Like, I don't know what I'm doing differently than yesterday.
We have a couple of raised hands out there in the audience from Hank and San Simeon and Michael Calderwood. So
Okay.
if you gentlemen can hear me, Hank, why don't you go ahead and speak first?
I'm ready to talk and I can't unmute you. I keep clicking, I keep clicking, and I keep clicking. So.
Excuse me, Haley?
Yes.
Do we have other people muted at this point in time?
Yes, we do.
Well, I see two people out in the listening audience that have their hands raised that would lead me to believe that they want to make a public comment. And the two people are Hank from San Simeon and Michael Calderwood. So if we could bring Hank up, unmute him and let's hear what he has to say. Can we do that?
Yes, I just did.
Okay. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Hank.
All right. Two items. One, I raised my hand, but then this little hand came across the screen and tried to crush my fingers, so I didn't know what to do. I'm just kidding. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, go ahead, Hank.
All right. A question, particularly for John and if you could answer it now or if maybe during the general manager's report. There was a meeting, I understand, on Friday that occurred with San Simeon, Supervisor Gibson, certain senior people at the Water Quality Board, and our general manager related to the potential approach, a regional approach for wastewater processing. I was wondering if one of the attendees, and I couldn't remember who was on the ad hoc committee from Cambria, if we could get a little update from your viewpoint as to what transpired at that meeting.
Well, three of us that are on board here today were there. Mr. Weigold, Director Pearson, and myself. And I don't know if Mr. Weigold will probably make some comments, and I'll be including that a little bit later on in the ad hoc committee reports.
Oh, I didn't know. I didn't see that. Sorry.
No problem. You wouldn't know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hank. Michael Calderwood, can you unmute Michael Haley?
I believe I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
All right, loud and clear, Michael. Go ahead, buddy.
Fantastic. Just a few technical helpful notes here. If viewers and call-in people have both the AGP feed up and the Zoom up, you got to shut one or the other off. My suggestion would be turn off the AGP feed or at least mute it. Haley, you're also on a phone and your audio is coming through the computer. So you're just getting that endless loop, that boop, 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 boop sound. So either hang up your phone and just use your computer audio to communicate, and that should eliminate the feedbacking issues we've been having here. I speak from experience. I use this platform all the time for business. So if we do those few things, turn off the AGP feed or at least mute it. And also if you have multiple devices logged in through the Zoom, just choose one to use going forward and we should be good to go as far as clarity. Haley, did you get that?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
See, now you still have your phone is coming up and your video is coming up. So you seem to have muted your video. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. It might work better the other way, but you'll figure it out. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. That certainly seems to have improved the quality of sound with regard to less or right, at least at this moment, no feedback. So moving on to item 4 and the manager's report and General Manager Weigold. John, are you there?
Yeah, President Farmer and can you hear me?
Let's try it again. We can hear you now.
Okay. President Farmer from CSD.
John, I'm sorry to interrupt, but at least at my end, we're not hearing you clearly. Is there something that you can do where you are, Haley, to allow General Manager Weigold to be heard more clearly?
Provide. We've changed a number of items and they are continuing to change by the day and sometimes by the hour. We ceased operations from the standpoint of handling customers on Monday, and starting today, we will be actually starting Monday. We started a number of staff working remotely, either from their homes or from their offices, to minimize interaction with other members of the staff and the public. For our facilities, Carlos and his team are minimizing contact and conducting operations that are only absolutely required. That includes minimum contact with the homeless population on the ranch and other CCSD properties. We've canceled most operations at the Veterans Hall. The farmers market will continue for the time being, as it's considered a topic under groceries, which is a necessity under the state requirements. From a utilities standpoint, I'll let the utilities manager cover a little more in his report, but we've staggered those that are working to minimize contact with one another and with the community. We've also stepped up our cross-training to another level to enable water personnel and wastewater personnel to do one another's jobs should we need to down the line. Additionally, we're handling only required operations in the utilities department, and we've established standard operating procedures so that if someone actually SOP procedures so that it becomes very, very easy for almost anyone to operate any of the processes and procedures. The fire chief already reviewed a lot of his operations. Those are posted online, but he is minimizing contact as well with the community. And from a administrative and finance position, we're generally operating as much as we can remotely. As you can see, we're still learning on this new Zoom system, which we put into effect earlier this week. There's another software component that we'll use for future board meetings that will keep the public and the board and staff separated, so that it won't be necessary to individually mute everyone coming on the call. So we'll have a little more efficiency going forward. That concludes my report, pending any questions you may have.
Thank you, General Manager Weigel. Does anyone from the board have any questions of Mr. Weigel? Well, seeing no hands raised and hearing no voices, I guess we're good to go, John. Thank you so much. And now let's move on to item B and the Finance Manager's report. Ms. Duffield?
Good afternoon, Board. I'm President Farmer. Can you hear me?
Hear you loud and clear.
Okay, perfect. So I just have two small additions to the Finance Manager's report. Since this writing, we had to cancel our planned meeting with Tyler this week. Tyler Technologies was supposed to be on site with our office for the entire week to review everything in the new system with the exception of utility billing, since they already have done that. So we are going to handle this through video conferencing and phone calls at a later date, which is yet to be determined. In addition, we finished the 17-18 audit. That is item B that you'll be hearing about a little later. And the auditor, Mr. Bruner, is also on the video conference with us today, and he will be giving a presentation. As General Manager Weigel mentioned, we've changed our operations here in the administrative office a little bit. We're asking for everyone to please pass the word to the community that given the situation that we're in right now, we are not able to accommodate cash payments. So if the public can please help us through this situation, if they can get a money order, a cashier's check, or they can simply mail us a check or put it in one of our drop boxes, that is the best situation for everyone at this time. And that concludes my report. I'm available to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Duffield. Anybody on the board have any questions of Ms. Duffield?
Yes, I do.
Director Rice.
Thank you. I was trying to get your attention earlier at the end of General Manager Weigel's report, and I couldn't get my sound to turn on, and I couldn't find my hand raiser. So sorry about that. I should be more technically adept by now. So actually, this is a comment to General Manager Weigel's report. Is that all right, President Farmer?
Sure.
So I was just going to suggest, I don't know how difficult, easy, expensive it is to, or if we already have something for people to sign up so they can get updates as they come through, like a mailing list or something. Like I'm on a couple of different mailing lists for the city of Pismo Beach. So if something happens, like the agenda, when they post the agenda, I get an email. Do we have something like that that we could set up so that people who want what the district is doing relating to COVID, like including what Ms. Duffield just said about not using cash or not accepting cash right now? Is there a way we can try and accomplish something like that? A sign up list for emails, updates?
We'll look into that. Right now, we're posting everything on our website, but we'll look at into that for updating the public.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Rice. Thank you, General Manager Weigold. Any other comments for Pam or for the Ms. Duffield or General Manager Weigold from the board? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to item 4C and the Utilities Manager's Report. And Mr. Dienzo, go right ahead.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Ray Dienzo here, Utilities Manager. I want to start off by saying that I'm pleased to announce that the PG&E Sustainable Solutions Project is kicked off as of February 27th. So we had a really good meeting with several of the staff and staff from PG&E. We got a lot accomplished then and continuing to get a lot accomplished. We will continue to be giving updates as we go along because there's been a lot of staff level coordination between us and the design team. So I'm glad to mention that. A couple of things to make mention: our wastewater treatment plant. We're continuing to be in preventative maintenance mode, whereas we're did some cleanup there as written in that report in detail. In our collection system, we were able to install some more manholes, and we're able to jet lines using our Vector truck, and also we're preparing to jet lines for our camera when we're going to start video inspecting a lot of these sewer lines. In the water area, I do want to welcome our new staff member, Cody Meeks. He's a graduate from Cal Poly with a Bachelor's of Science in Environmental Management. He's proven to have to bring many talents and add value to our group, as he's already proving. Also, in light of our water system, I want to make mention that we put new fencing around the San Simeon SCADA well site, the SCADA near the San Simeon well site, which is crucial for our security because we use that for our water and wastewater feed communications. And also, I want to make mention the repair that was mentioned on Cardiff that happened in mid-February, where in spite of the phone communication mishap, I'm glad to say that our team responded really well and without service interruption, and they were able to fix that old steel line that was there. So I commend our group for that, even though there was that phone communication, as we mentioned, even last month. Also, to conclude the water report, we completed our manual meter reads as well. Now moving on to the sustainable water facility, wanted to let you all know that we finally got our replacement RO filters that was delivered in February, and we now have them in stock, ready to put online in less than a couple of days' notice. So I wanted to make mention about that. The audit for our system there, unfortunately, was postponed to April. It was scheduled for the month of March, but that's going to be postponed to April due to some personal issues with with H2O Innovations. And also, I want to make mention that next month we plan to bring some recommendations to the board regarding the process for stage 3 drought declaration. I know that that's the mechanism that we would run the SWF plant, but I wanted to let you know that we're going to work on the actual process of the triggers that would trigger a stage 3. I'm glad to, also just, the recent rains that we got. It was looking like there was a good possibility for that, but hopefully these rains that we got will curtail that possibility.
Wow. Well, I think it's that way everywhere. I mean, good luck on finding any.
And also, relating to the subject of water conservation, we had a good meeting with with the Coastal Commission because we wanted to run by them the development of our database and our retrofit program. We did a lot of good work with that, and we wanted to be sure that the Coastal Commission was on board with what we were doing. So we had a very positive meeting. They liked what we were doing, and they liked what we've done with the database setup. And so now we're in the next stage of populating it, which would be it's the labor-intensive portion of it. That's why we wanted to run it by them before we actually went ahead and did all of that work. Last couple of things. The well data is available online, and it looks like everything is tracking average. I was starting to get concerned that with the dry season so far that we were getting, that it was going to be below average, but with the recent rains over, as indicated in the Rocky Butte rain gauge, we got over 4 inches here in the month of March. And because of that, it's tracking average again. Last couple of things. I wanted to, just as a public service reminder for the community to not flush disinfectant wipes in our sewer system, because even though it seems like it's flushable, a lot of those can be a problem as it accumulates. So I wanted to make mention of that. And I also wanted to make mention, if people are having concern about the safety of our water system due to the coronavirus outbreak, I wanted to assure everyone that the disinfection program that we have with all our water systems is more than sufficient to disinfect all kinds of viruses that would be in the system, like typically like a minimum of 0.2 parts per million is what's recommended for a complete disinfection of pathogens, but we currently run at 0.5 parts per million of chlorine disinfection. So I wanted to reassure everyone that the water is safe, even with these concerns. It's always been safe. There's a lot of other pathogens out there other than coronavirus that would be harmful, but the disinfection process that we use is sufficient to handle all of those concerns. So that concludes my report. I'm available for questions, of course.
Anyone on the board have any questions or comments for Ray? I see Michael and Mary both have their hands up. Is this with regard to what Mr. D'Enzo just said?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Well, Mary, why don't you go first, and then after that, Michael Calderwood, and then Director Rice. So, Mary, go ahead first.
Okay, I think I heard Mr. D'Enzo say that he was looking at possibly changing how you calculate the stages of emergency, stages 1, 2, and 3. And that was an issue that had come up, a couple of years ago, and Coastal Commission had responded in several letters to both the CSD and the county, and highly encouraged the board not to change or alter stages of emergency until the coastal development permit for the emergency water project starts to go through the county and through the hearing process, because the plant was built, based on the stages of emergency at the time. So that's my one question. How is that being worked out, or does the Coastal Commission know that you're doing that? And the second thing would be on the retrofit program. What I saw, it looked like that the retrofits were only being measured back a couple of years. when in fact the retrofit program has existed since at least 1999. And I have a question about how, if these retrofits are being counted twice. They were supposed to be mitigation against growth all the years before 2014. And so I don't understand how you can just start in midstream at 2014 trying to measure retrofits when that program's actually been going on for 30 years or something. That's it.
Ray, did you wish to respond?
Yeah, I can. So I'm glad that people remember that 2014 resolution regarding the running of the sustainable water facility. And when I said changes, I misspoke with that. It wasn't going to be a wholesale change. It was basically going to be based on what the board decided back in 2014, and it wasn't going to be contradicting that. But it's one of those things that we haven't implemented a stage 3 in a while, and I wanted to just the recommendations that I would bring in April would be consistent with that resolution, correct? And in light of the retrofit credits, one of the things we ran by Coastal was we were, and I'm blanking on the date. It was going to be back to 2014 was when we were going to go back for retrofits. And the reason being was we didn't want to, like you said, have a danger of double counting any retrofit credits. So there is a limit to how far back we were going to go because of that issue of accidentally double counting it. And we ran that by Coastal, and they were on board with that.
Does that mean you're going to start from scratch as of 2014 and not count all the retrofits that had been done prior?
Well, there were some retrofits that were used prior to 2014, and I honestly wish that we would have tracked it better, but it wasn't tracked as well as it is now. So, and even with the retrofit credits, one of the main suggestions that Coastal had was to use the earlier ones first before we even go back as far as 2014. So it might sound like a wholesale change, but we're trying to use the best data that's that won't be in danger of double counting.
President Farmer, point of honor.
I just want to interject here that I'm realizing right now that a particular comment, like a public comment was made by Mary, but then Mary, you're kind of having a dialogue back and forth with Mr. D'Enzo, and we'd like to keep protocol, let's say, similar to the way it would be if we were having a regular board meeting. So, I would allow you to make a statement, in a public comment to Mr. D'Enzo's utilities, report, but then beginning to have a dialogue back and forth. We wouldn't be doing that at a regular board meeting, and I don't think we should, allow us to begin to do something different just because we have a different way of conducting the meetings now online. So, I should have perhaps interrupted a little bit sooner, but that's the comment that I wish to make now.
I apologize. That's right.
Well,
Sorry about that.
Well, I kind of lost track there for a moment as well, but thank you so much. Michael, you wish to make a comment as well?
Yes, I'm thinking about our current pandemic situation and the impact it may or may not have on our water usage, and then the knock-on to things like revenue streams. My thought process is, with people now working from home, with kids out of school, home, water usage will go up. With all the additional very stringent hand washing we'll all be doing, water usage will increase, and of course the knock-on through the system, water treatment. Looking then at the commercial use, I would assume we're going to see a significant drop in usage from hotels and businesses and restaurants and all of the large commercial consumers of water in the town. Do we have any thought about paying a little bit more attention to that balance to see if it will, A, impact our water supply and delivery and wastewater treatment capabilities, and also extending out then to the revenue side? Are we going to be challenged revenue-wise by the loss on the commercial side? And should we have a monitoring process in place, and B, some way of alerting and triggering should those revenue things become much more dire than perhaps we had anticipated, so that the board and the staff can make appropriate adjustments to behavior, expenditure, all the things along those lines. So that was sort of the thought that I had. Just curious about if that had been thought about throughout the staff and the board. Thank you.
Yeah, Michael, thank you for your thoughtful observations there. Ray, do you have any comments?
Yeah, well, I do want to say that we've as a world have never been here before, so it's hard to address that other than, you know, the way we conduct water planning is we do account for spikes, seasonal, you know, even we have contingencies for things like that. You know, we take care of peaks, and we take care of seasonal spikes, and even you know, during vacation times. This is obviously an issue that I'm afraid that I'm not going to have data on hand until we get through these next couple of weeks or even a month.
All right, thank you, Ray. Director Rice, you wish to make a comment?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yes. First thing is something that I'm starting to feel like is a broken record, but that just means I've almost said it almost often enough. There's a difference between efficiency and conservation, and I think it's important for people to understand the difference, because conservation means cutting back your usual uses. Efficiency is about using every drop more effectively to do the job that you're trying to do. So that's my first statement, and I will continue to say that probably for the rest of my life, but definitely at least for the rest of this term of mine. Second, I appreciate the comments that Mary made on the retrofits, and I fully support that we only go from 2014, because it's really going to be hard to verify things that are older, what happened with all those things, not just because the records weren't kept appropriately, but it's really hard to know retrofit points that were bought, you know, in 2007. We have no way of knowing, you know, what that outcome was, and the new setup that Mr. D'Anzo took up and reviewed with the Coastal Commission staff, to me looks like a good fresh start. I'd rather start fresh and be assured of any savings that we're making through either retrofits or rebate programs, whatever it is. I'd rather be on the safe side and just start like we don't have any banked at all, than to start too far back. I appreciate the whole town has been conserving and changing out their faucets or their shower heads or their toilets. And I appreciate all that savings. I think we all do. And that's what the difference is between efficiency, because that's efficiency that we've done all those things, and not just because people have reduced their use. I'm not a nurse or a doctor, but I still think you don't need to have the water running when you're soaping your hands for 20 seconds. So hand washing shouldn't cause that much more water use. Please correct me, somebody, if I'm incorrect about that, but soaping your hands and scrubbing them good doesn't require the water to be running. So
yeah, it's kind of like when you're brushing your teeth. You know, you can get your brush wet and then turn the water off while you're scrubbing your teeth. So thank you for that observation, Director Rice.
Eric, can I speak?
Yes, Director Howell.
Yes, I have one question. This is as much perhaps for Mr. Carmel. On page 7, excuse my phone here. It'll shut up in a minute. Question for Mr. Carmel and possibly Mr. D'Enzo. On page 17, conservation and permits, the first paragraph, there's a sentence there, and I'm a little concerned. It says the form has been designed to collect additional information regarding the proposed occupancy of the retrofitted property. This is the part that concerns me. The approximate number of permanent residents. I'd like to know from council if this is information that A, can we collect it, and B, if we collect it, do we have to take special measures to safeguard it? That is having to do with the number of expected residents in the property. I'm aware that it is very. I suspect we're skating on some rather thin ice on that one. So I think opinion from council, if not today, certainly before Mr. D'Enzo goes forward, I would really like to have some feedback from the council on that. Thanks.
Well, you raise a good point, and I think I'd rather just take a look at the issue and then give you an answer.
Thank you. That's what I thought you would say. Yes, thanks.
All right.
I'm finished. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Howell. Any further comments with regard to Mr. D'Enzo's report? Well, hearing none. Thank you so much, Ray. And let's move on now to board member committee and liaison reports. And,
Harry?
Yes.
I do have my hand up. I did.
I didn't see your raised hand on the side here. My apologies. Yes, Director Pearson.
Yeah, again, I'd like to go back to the agenda and see if we can't move item 7, the audit, and 7D, the other above these reports, and get these done earlier. Get Mr. Bruner done, and then the other people who are on the call for that 7D issue. Is that possible for us to do?
Sure. How does, just a voice remark there, how does everyone on the board feel about, taking item 5 and moving up item 7C, regular business, before we do the liaison and board member and committee reports? Everyone feel comfortable with that?
Moving 7D up or moving all of 7?
Moving
all of 7. Everyone feel okay with that?
All of 7? Okay.
All right. So let's go ahead and do that. And let's start with the auditor's report and regular business and item 7B. And so that's on page 46. So perhaps Manager Weigel, could you introduce that item? Excuse us for the shifting here in protocol.
Sure, President Farmer. Agenda item 7A is discussion and consideration to adopt ordinance 01-2020.
We're doing 7B first, the auditor's report.
Okay, apologize. Agenda item 7B is to receive and file the independent auditor's report for fiscal year 2017/18. Staff is recommending that the board receive and file the attached independent auditor's report and financial statements for the year ended June 30th, 2018, presented by David Bruner, CPA, Accountancy Corporation.
So, Ms. Duffield, would you like to pursue this with Mr. Bruner?
Yes, President Palmer, Mr. Bruner is out there somewhere. Maybe he can raise his hand, Haley can unmic him, and then he can give his presentation.
He's ready to go.
I see that Director Rice has her hand up. Did you wish to make a comment, Director Rice, before we move forward? Pardon me? No, okay, thank you. All right, excuse me. Go ahead, Ms. Duffield and Mr. Bruner.
I think we're waiting on Mr. Bruner.
Well,
He probably doesn't know that we moved the schedule.
yeah, that's probably true. I was just going to make a comment that, true to form, Mr. Bruner's a little late, but it's probably he didn't realize that we moved the schedule.
Pam, can you call him on his cell phone and ask him to turn around?
I can. Do you want to just go to the other item while I'm getting a hold of him?
And that would be item 7D.
Let's see if we can get him real quick, because he's right there. We just need him to turn around.
Just get him to turn around.
I think Dawn went to get him.
Well, I'll make this brief comment, totally off the mark with regard to money. It's a lovely day outside. Right now, it's a beautiful sunny day, and no matter what the challenges are right now facing this area and everywhere else, we have much to be grateful for with regard to nature around us at this moment in time. And so I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Mr. President?
Yes, Director Rice.
Maybe Vice President Stidel could make some comments while we're waiting for Mr. Bruner to come up. Because didn't the Finance Committee look at this or no?
Oh, they looked at it.
Cindy, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there we go. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, the report itself, the audit report, Ms. Duffield and Mr. Bruner, and the questions that were posed to Mr. Bruner after his report review were readily answered by he and by the finance manager. There were questions to him also in terms of any recommendations that he might have regarding the overall audit and the condition of condition of financial executions, meaning the kinds of things you would do with internal controls. And he had a couple of recommendations related to things that had occurred historically that Ms. Duffield, upon her arrival, had resolved fully, and there were a couple of things in there not of material impact to what's going on with this audit report that are also in process for having a stricter control. One of the many attributes of the financial work that Ms. Duffield does for us is that she has a very strong opinion about very strong internal controls, which I think is exactly something that fits our needs very well, and we have been the beneficiary of. And the Finance Committee voted to move their positive recommendation forward to the board relative to the acceptance of the audit report. And it appears maybe that Mr. Bruner is available now, so if that was sufficient for my finance report, I guess I will say that is a completion.
Well, thank you, Vice President Stidel, and I want to thank you, Director Rice, for recommending that we bring Vice President Stidel forward as a representative of the Finance Committee or the Chair of the Finance Committee. Thank you so much for that suggestion. So, Pam, you have Mr. Bruner back on the line?
Yes, he's available now.
All right, why don't the two of you go right ahead? Ms.
David,
Duffield?
are you there?
It's not.
We can see you. We can see your face there, Mr. Bruner. So just go ahead and give us your report.
I don't think he can.
Well, I just heard your voice, so why don't you go ahead and speak, Mr. Bruner?
Yeah, still muted by host.
You're good.
David, go right ahead.
Haley, can you send him a message?
I don't. I have the chat feature off.
General Manager Weigel, did you wish to make a comment? I thought I saw you raise your hand.
I was just trying to signal Mr. Bruner that he can go ahead because I think we can hear him.
Yeah, it seemed like that we could earlier. David, can you hear us?
Doesn't look like it.
No, it doesn't. Haley, do you have any suggestions?
If he can call in using the meeting ID and passcode, and we'll be able to hear him.
Okay, I'll call his office right now.
Okay.
Well, I know Director Rice, you were able to guide me in a proper direction there. Do you have any other further observations to make, or should we just sit here patiently? Well, the phone's ringing in Modesto there, so maybe we'll have Mr. Bruner on very shortly.
That's all I was going to say. Vice President Stidel, was the Finance Committee comfortable with both the questions they were able to get answered and the audit itself?
Yes, they were, and that action was specifically at the court, as well as that question was asked of Ms. Duffield by the committee members, and everything was in the affirmative in moving it forward.
Well, it looks like she's talking to him now. Thank you, Vice President Stidel. I have to say, as having the first audit after actually having a finance committee that had a chance to take a look at give it a thorough look over and to work with them to get it done, I feel extremely comfortable going with the recommendation of the Finance Committee. I'd like to hear the report from Mr. Bruner. But
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay then. But wait, I can't hear you guys.
Oh.
I'm not hearing anything from you guys.
David, can you hear me now? David?
I can't hear you.
Haley, is there a way to...
Yeah, now I hear you. Okay. Okay, you can hear me?
We can hear you, David. Go right ahead.
Okay, cool. Okay, so so I completed the audit for June 30th, 2018. You have a copy report. It's like when I went over yesterday with the Finance Committee, the general fund is in a fairly good shape. It's the sewer and the water fund, particularly the sewer fund, that has some deficits. And then also, we talk about like your net pension liability. That number is going up. That you guys are have to work something out on that. So those are like the key areas. I would just, any questions from you guys?
Ms. Duffield, would you like to make any comments before I ask members of the board if they have any remarks to make?
Sure. So during the Finance Committee meeting that was held yesterday, as Vice President Steidel noted, there were some internal control items that we need to look at and develop better procedures for. So most of those we have done already, but we're going to continue to review the list that Mr. Bruner provided and ensure that the things that we put in place today meet the criteria for what he's requesting. There are some things that we need to work through, and those types of things, like one of the items he mentioned was reconciliation of some of our manual checkbook accounts, like the Veterans Hall. That will hopefully get resolved when we go live with Tyler, because those will become part of our system and not be something that we're handling outside of our system like what exists today. But I don't have any other comments unless there's any questions from the board.
Any members of the board wish to ask any questions of Mr. Bruner or Ms. Duffield? Yes, Director Howell.
Yes, I have one question, and then there are a number of typos which may have been caught during the Finance Committee meeting, but I'd like to be sure about that. The question I have is on page 98 of our packet, of page 28 of the auditor's report. And at the bottom of the page with the depreciable capital assets, the additions column, there's an $11 million in there, and I was trying to figure out what that was. Can someone enlighten us on that?
Sure, I'd be happy to answer that question. So we had not capitalized the SWF system up until this point. There was some discussions, historic discussions that were happening between the previous auditor, the finance manager, and the previous district engineer on at what point such a project should be capitalized. So I have a difference of opinion on what all the past members had said, and it should be capitalized at the time that we are able to use the facility, regardless of the fact if we're using it or not. The project has been completed. It's available for us to use if we were permitted to, or if we needed to use it in emergency. The contractor did his job and it is complete. So in light of that, I talked with Mr. Bruner this year this year for the fiscal year 17-18 audit, and we both agreed that it should have been capitalized many years ago. So that is basically a correction that you're seeing that was a prior year correction, but also it impacts current year depreciation. So that's what that adjustment is. Basically what you're seeing is that $11 million was residing in construction in progress in past audits, and it's no longer in construction in progress. It got moved down to actually being a facilities and buildings. So it kind of moved places.
Fixed assets.
Thank you.
And as far as your question about a couple of typos, there are a couple that we need to correct, and we will be making those corrections before the final audit is produced.
Yes.
There's one where I want to be sure it's a typo and not an actual meaningful statement on the last page 114 of the audit. First paragraph, however, providing an opinion on compliance with those provisions was an objective of my audit. And accordingly, I do not express such an opinion. I think maybe the word not is missing from there, but I wanted to be sure about that one.
I'm not sure what page that is.
It's your submittal, it's your transmittal letter at the very end. Report on internal control of financial reporting and on compliance and other matters.
Oh, okay. Hold on,
Yeah.
hold on.
It's the second to last paragraph, compliance and other matters, that part. It's just the last sentence of that first paragraph.
The purpose of this report is solely to describe the scope of our testing and control compliance and the results of that testing. Right. So I'm not giving an opinion. I'm saying that I tested the internal control and compliance, but for accounting standards, I did not issue an opinion. I didn't find any problems, but like the auditor's report, I issue an opinion. I'm not issuing an opinion. I'm just saying I looked at that and that I did not find anything wrong.
So what you wanted to say is quote, however, providing an opinion on compliance with these provisions was not an objective of my audit. Is that what you?
Yes, right.
Okay,
It wasn't to provide an opinion. It was just to describe the scope of my testing.
I figured that's what you meant, but I wanted to be sure because that is
okay. Thank you. Yes, Thank you.
Thanks. The other typos were very minor, but that one had some actual consequence to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Any further questions of Mr. Bruner from the members of the board?
President Farmer, I have my hand up.
Director Rice, go right ahead.
Thank you. Just super briefly, if anybody has an idea that is not environmentally damaging, like a balloon drop or something, I think we need to be rewarding Ms. Duffield because she's really done a heck of a lot of work to get a heck of a lot of things straightened out. And I can't thank her enough for being the kind of professional that she is.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Pam.
Well, I think we all would concur in that remark, especially since the pressures of getting this audit done were not the only challenges you've been facing recently. So our hats off to you, Ms. Duffield. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, looking at agenda item 7B, receive and file the independent auditor's report. Mr. Carmel, does the board need to take action on this?
No formal action is necessary.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. So, I guess.
President Farmer?
Yes, Vice President Steidel.
Yeah, I had my hand up.
Well, okay. Yes, you do. Thank you. Go right ahead.
I wanted to reiterate what Director Rice had said, and to add to that, that Pam was very capable in directing her staff all through this process. It wasn't just her interactions, but the direction of the staff and the contributions of the staff. I have the great deal of confidence and admiration for she and the folks that she has working with her. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right now, pardon me, I feel a little bit awkward since we've kind of jumped around here and, moved to regular business, and we're taking regular business kind of out of order now. Do the other board members feel okay, feel comfortable with the fact that not quite following the usual protocol here? I want to apologize if things are a little bit more awkward than usual. Are we okay with moving forward and staying with regular business and addressing item 7D? Can we do that?
Yeah, I think we're fine. I think we need to thank Mr. Bruner for his work and
excuse me, I had a question. Is it coming to the audience?
Oh.
We didn't take public comment.
Is this a public comment with regard to the auditor's report?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. One comment.
Well, I'm sorry, it is an agenda item. Was I supposed to speak but before it?
Oh, you're talking about item 7D?
Oh, no, I'm talking about the audit.
Okay, well, we were kind of finished with that, but I guess everything else is a little bit unusual today, so.
Sorry, I didn't hear a request for public comment about the audit.
You're right.
Okay, go right ahead, Mary. Thank you.
So my question in hearing what Pam Duffield said about capitalizing the project, it sounds like the reasoning was that we're capitalizing a project called the SWF. And as you know, as far as I'm concerned, there is no project called the SWF. The capitalization of the project should be the EWS. That's the only project that exists and in fact doesn't even have full permits for it. So the capitalization of an EWS should have been a completion, way back in 2014. If we're talking about capitalizing an SWF, that project is it's ongoing. We don't really know the end of it. And so I kind of wonder how do you figure that in an audit going after the fact and calling the EWS a different project? So that's one question. And then my other question, are all the other audits considered receive and file? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Duffield, would you wish to answer that question there with regard to receive and file and whatever the other comments that Ms. Webb said?
It's appropriate that we capitalize the project regardless of what everybody describes as the title or not. The project is capitalized. As far as receive and file on the audit, yes, that is historically what's happened. This report is from an independent auditor. It is not from us or our constituents. So it is appropriate that it's a receive and file item.
Thank you. I see that we have another request for public comment on this item, so we're still back on the auditor's report. Tina Dickerson?
Yeah.
So, Harry, am I on there? Can you hear me? So back to what Mary was just relating to, I had the exact same thought and question. Why are we referring to this as the SWF when we do not have, we don't have a CDP for anything, a regular CDP? Why do we continue down this path? So that is my concern as well. Thank you.
Could you go ahead and repeat your comment there, Tina? You were kind of breaking up a little bit. Tina?
Oh, sorry, Harry. You didn't hear my comment?
Well, I just heard part of it. It broke up a little bit. If you would just briefly repeat
Okay,
yourself.
I said that my comment was related to what Mary just brought up with regard to the SWF being referred to, the SWF, when we have absolutely nothing on that. We only have the EIR that was done originally for the emergency water supply. We have only that, still an emergency permit for that. We have nothing for a sustainable water facility, and we do not have, as yet, a regular CDP for the EWS, the emergency water supply. So I really resent that it keeps being called something that it is not. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone wish to comment on?
President Farmer?
Yes, Director Rice.
So the capitalization is probably long overdue, partially because there was a notice of completion filed on the project. I think that was in 2015, but I would have to check my records to be sure. And I also think that the issue of the name, while we do not disagree on it, we do not agree on it, and there are many good reasons to stick with one name or another. There's an explanation as to how it was changed to SWF without even board discussion. All of those things, though, are a little bit like, you know, we're arguing over something when there's much more important things, like the fact that it hadn't been capitalized for multiple years and now we're capitalizing it. We do have a loan on a project, a physical facility that was built using that loan and a grant. And I think that while there are disagreements about what to call the additional facility we have, I think in accounting terms, it's an appropriate thing to have probably done a couple of years ago. Yes, it's true we don't have a CDP yet, but the CDP is part of the permit for the EWS, the fact that we do a follow-up, so they're kind of linked together. But that doesn't change the accounting of it, because it's still an accounting of a actual physical facility. And you know, if we call it Newton's Folly, we could call it 805 balloons. I mean, you know, to me, the nomenclature, while important and does speak to what the project is also an actual physical existing facility that we need to be accounting for appropriately and depreciating as necessary for the district's own records and for the board to be able to have that oversight. This is why we have an independent auditor come in, because they're independent of our staff and they provide information to the board about whether or not our staff is actually doing the accounting in the acceptable ways and the legal ways that they're required to do so. So I understand the questions that were raised by Ms. Dickinson and Ms. Webb. I also think that in the context of the audit report, because we are being consistent with the nomenclature across various places, calling it the SWF, regardless of whether you agree with that or not, we all know which facility we're referring to, and we all know there's more things that need to be done. And I'm glad we're finally getting the accounting part of it right.
Well, thank you, Director Rice. Hopefully in some fashion or another, your comments right there were appreciated and acceptable to the public comments made by Ms. Dickinson and Ms. Webb. I believe we are now finished with item 7B, unless someone out there wishes to make another public comment on this item.
Vice President Stidel has her hand up.
I was just reaching over to take it down. The things have been addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Duffield, for. All right, thank you. So let's move on now to, if we can, item 7D, discussion and consideration of request from Green Space for transfer of irrigation meter. General Manager Weigel, would you introduce this item?
Yes, President Farmer, before we proceed, I'd recommend that our auditor be allowed to depart the meeting.
All right, Mr. Bruner, thank you so much for attending this meeting and kind of hanging in there while we kind of got things straightened out technically. And we appreciate your service with regard to finally bringing the audit to us. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much, General Manager Weigold.
Okay, President Farmer, agenda item number 7D is discussion and consideration of request from Green Space for the transfer of an irrigation meter. Staff is recommending that the Board of Directors continue to discuss and continue the request from Green Space to approve the transfer of an irrigation meter from property on Pierce Avenue to green spaces reserve located at 2264 Center Street, and the request to waive the associated fees. We've added some additional information to the staff report since last week, and got the utilities manager, district engineer Ray D'Enzo, standing by to answer some more detailed questions regarding that transfer.
I also have a public comment whenever you guys are ready.
Go right ahead, Haley.
Okay, I received a public comment from Mike Lyons for item 7D, and it states, in view of the precarious nature of the district's financial health, I oppose the proposal that the district absorb the cost of the transfer of this meter. It isn't just a matter of waiving the fees. There is actual cost involved, estimated from the $2,500 upwards. Just as the district has re-examined its former policies about not charging fees for the vets hall and perhaps other publicly owned facilities, to pass along full cost of meter transfers to the applicant. Also, the staff report questions the ownership of the meter, and until that is fully resolved, I suggest that this entire matter be shelved. To move forward with the transfer of a meter of unknown ownership may well expose the district to legal action. Sincerely yours, Mike Lyons.
All right, well, thank you so much, Michael. With regard to unknown ownership, I believe this belonged to, Mr. Arnold. Does anyone wish to make any comments on Mike Lyons' comment himself? Mr. Weigold? Or Ray, excuse me, Ray, I should address that to you.
Well, yeah, those are all true statements, but I guess the matter at hand is we do have a verbal from Mr. Arnold that the new owner is okay with the transfer, but yes, it hasn't been officially memorialized, on paper. But if that's the issue here, if they want to, officially have the new owner okay the transfer on paper, then I guess that's the issue at hand.
I see two people who wish to speak on this item. First, let me go to Director Rice, and then after that, Mary Webb.
Why don't you take the public comment first, President Farmer?
All right. Mary, go right ahead.
Okay, so there were many questions last week that had not been resolved that have since been resolved, and I thought that a letter has already been sent to the CSD yesterday from the owners of the property that was purchased from Mr. Arnold, and I don't want to give their names, but I'll read what they said. Honorable board members, we understand the Cambria Community Services District is considering the transfer of an irrigation meter from a vacant lot we purchased from Jesse Arnold. At the time of the purchase, Mr. Arnold made clear his desire to transfer the irrigation meter to green space, which we wholeheartedly agreed to. We are in the process of completing a voluntary merger to join these lots with our neighboring property at 2442 Pierce Avenue. So another question that you had last week is whether or not they would do a voluntary lot merger, which will save the community water. So that is also happening, and that the new owners of the lot agreed to this transfer of the meter. This letter serves as notice that we, the undersigned, the owner of the property, we are the current owners of the said property, a vacant lot located in Cambria from which the irrigation meter is to be transferred when approved by the CSD. Number two, the vacant lot stated above was purchased from Mr. Arnold with the understanding the irrigation meter was to be transferred to green space. Number three, we release Mr. Arnold, green space, and the CCSD from any claims, past, present, and future, pertaining to the irrigation meter and its use and transfer. That was another question that you had to make sure that the CSD was being released. Number four, that we, the undersigned, are not responsible for any costs, fees, or other expenses related to the transfer, and that green space, as the recipient, has agreed to cover any and all expenses related to the transfer. We hope this letter serves to clarify any questions regarding this matter. Should you require any additional information, please contact them. And then Greenspace also sent a letter last week, for the record, just trying to resolve some of the other questions and the fact that we're a nonprofit public benefit organization in the community doing mitigation work, which is required, as Mr. Lyons knows, by the land use authority and the advisory bodies of the NCAC and our county, Title 23 and the CZLUO. We're required to replant trees as mitigation for development that's happening in our community. So this water would be used to water the little pine seedlings so that Greenspace can continue in our mission supporting the community and the county to make sure that we are reforesting the area when we build new houses and new developments here. I know there is a cost, and we just ask that as many of the fees as can be waived, and then perhaps whatever the difference is in the end, we can split the cost or something like that. And I think I have Rick is also not on the Zoom meeting, but he's on my phone. If there's any questions, maybe he can answer those. Thank you.
I see that that Tina Dickinson has her hand up to make a public comment. So before I go back to Director Rice, Ms. Dickinson?
Can you hear me, Harry?
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay, so I watched this portion of the meeting last week, and what I understood was that it was a two-part item, and the first one was to waive the fees of the transfer, and the board voted for that. What was to come back was the cost, any cost involved for CCSD to install the meter. I have not heard from Mr. D'Enzo what I was anticipating hearing today. He was talking last week of 5,000 to 5,500. Where are the numbers? What and how will this impact the community if there are any fees associated? That is my question. Thank you.
Ray, can you answer Ms. Dickinson's question?
Yes. So our staff did do a field investigation of that, and there were a couple of options. Typically in installations, we ask for a $5,000 deposit, just to cover any costs, and whatever costs that we don't use, we give back. In this case, as is outlined in the letter, the most probable cost would be about $2,500 because based on history of these similar installations, it costs about that much, and we estimate it to be about a 15-foot run, and then cost of the meter, cost of the trenching. The only uncertainties that are always built into this is whenever we do any kind of trenching project, assuming that there's not a big root or something like that in the way, or we find something broken, but our most probable estimate of cost in this would be about $2,500.
Ray, I just want to make a comment. I seem to recall there was some trenching done adjacent to, this is maybe 3-4 years ago, and there was some trenching done adjacent to the green space property going down the alley next to it, and it became much more problematic for the contractor that we hired to do that because they were running into some obstacles, I think somewhat similar to what you were saying with regard to a root being in the way or something like that. So I guess that's always a possibility, right?
Yeah, yes, that's correct. We did, after looking at it just last week, we were trying to stay away from that issue with the root balls of those trees, and we don't anticipate that we're gonna encounter that, but until construction actually happens, we're not 100% sure.
Ms. Dickinson wishes to make another comment.
Thank you, Harry. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Harry, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Tina.
Okay, so the second part of my question was not answered. It seems that the fee has been reduced by a half or more. I want to know how this will or will not impact the entire Cambria community, because not everyone is a member of Green Space. So I would like to know who is going to pay the $2,500 or whatever it amounts to. Thank you.
President Farmer.
Yes, Vice President Stidel.
I think that we're starting to get into a conversation mode again about something, and that we need to be aware of this. If it's going to be handled as a request for public speak, then just the initial discussion should
be allowed. I understand what you're saying. Thank you for that observation.
One thing I'll relay to Ms. Dickinson is that there was a staff report for 7D that outlined all of this material information that is being delivered from Mr. D'Anzo, and there was a visual look at the site by staff to make the determination on the expected cost. And so if by chance you didn't have that in front of you, that may be something that you would want to look for on the agenda out on the website.
If I could, yes, Director Rice, you wish to make a comment.
This is actually a question for Green Space. I'm assuming that Mary Webb is representing them at this meeting. Is that the case? Thank you. Would it be okay, President Farmer, if I asked her a question?
Go right ahead. I have one of my own, so go right ahead.
Is the $5,000 deposit, would that be an obstacle to Green Space, getting Green Space to move this irrigation meter? Would it become an obstacle that having that much money all at once as deposit? I mean, obviously it's not easy to come up with $5,000 no matter who you are, but.
Yeah, that's quite a bit, especially when, so the other part of this, and like I said, I had Rick on the phone, but I couldn't tell if he had a question. There was a meter on the front of the property, so it shouldn't be trenching. The meter is just in the ground. So it just should require a pipe that is reconnected. So there should not be a lot of trenching. And the price has not been reduced by $5,000 to $2,500. That's a mistake. It's not. It was estimated as a deposit of $5,000. We think the cost now is probably $2,500. $5,000 is a lot for us, and especially now with this pandemic, our offices are not open. As you know, we're not going to be able to have our events. So this agenda item just happens to be coming up at a hard time right now also. So it would be, Rick was willing and able to meet the staff out there to see if they can figure out exactly what the cost would be, which would be much easier if we could do something like that.
President Farmer, I know you had a comment. I would like to make a motion if I could, and then we can continue discussion.
Go right ahead, Director Rice.
So I move that we, sorry, let me get to the right page so I'm moving the right thing here. I move that we authorize transfer of an irrigation meter from a property on Pierce Avenue to Green Space's Creekside Reserve. And that's the end of my motion. I have a little bit of discussion. My understanding is that we already waived the fee. Is that true, Mr. D'Anzo or Weigold?
We waive the administration fee.
The administrative fee. Okay, so that's my motion, and I think that we can talk about the covering the cost or not covering the cost or the 5,000 deposit or 2,500 deposit. We can do that after we deal with the initial motion, because I do want to get this moving forward, and who knows what's going to happen with coronavirus and all the things happening going forward. It may be that the thing doesn't get, but let's get the paperwork done. So that's kind of why I'm making the motion to have that irrigation meter transferred from Pierce Avenue to the Center Street property. And that alone is the motion. And then we can talk about whether or not we're able to either spread out the deposit if it has to be 5, or maybe try and get some kind of 50-50 split or something. But let's deal with first the motion on transferring, if there's a second.
Seeing Director Howell waving his finger there, so thank you so much, Director Howell. The only comment that I wanted. Oh, did you wish to make a comment as well, Don?
I wanted to second the motion, but I also wanted to offer an amendment. Can I do that first, or do you?
Well, go ahead and offer an amendment. I see Director Pearson also has his hand up, so go right ahead, Don.
The amendment first, and then if that's acceptable, I will accept. It will save us. And if it's acceptable to Director Rice, I would like to, even though the administrative fees have been waived, I think that should be included in the motion that we approve the transfer. And I would like to add at the end and waive all administrative fees. If that's acceptable, I second.
Okay. Can I interject briefly, President Farmer?
Yes, go right ahead.
I just want to remind the board that a transfer agreement will be required to perfect this transfer. So I didn't want you to lose sight of that. Maybe as part of the second motion, we can get into the transfer agreement and whatever you want to include in that. But I didn't want to lose sight of it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Carmel. Director Pearson.
Yeah, a couple things. Number one, I'm surprised Director Howell didn't bring this up, but we haven't crossed all the T's and I's yet. We don't have the letter. We don't have a real ownership established on the meter, although I do appreciate what Ms. Webb did in getting us that information. We're not to that point yet, I don't think, because I don't think we've established it. So I'm a little bit concerned about that. We're waiving the administration fee, which is $500. We're not waiving the installation fee. Is that correct? I'm a little confused on that portion.
Can I speak to that, Mr. Chairman? May I speak?
Go ahead, Director Howell.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know how to raise my hand electronically, so you're seeing me doing this. It seems to me that could be a subject for a second discussion once the actual costs are known. I think it's a little hard for us to commit the community's funds if we don't know what they are. So if there's some way that we can ask if the project goes forward, but that we have a firm price before we actually approve, because otherwise it's amounts to a blank check, and I really don't like that idea.
Well, I'm not sure I would support any Mr. And the utility manager has already stated that it's going to be hard to get a exact price because they're going to have to do some trenching, they believe, and if they have to, that they don't know what they're going to run into. They could run into a gas line for all we know. First of all, not happy with the fact that we don't have the ownership of that meter established, so that we can go forward with that. I know we have a letter, I know we have that, so I'm willing to go forward, but I'm concerned about that. The other thing that comes up on these transfers is that there's got to be a reduction in the amount of water being used. Does that mean that the current owner of the lot that it's being moved off on Pierce promises never to use that property as a garden, which it's been used as in the past, and promises not to irrigate that? I'm not sure that that's settled yet either. So I've still got some outstanding questions on this one that I'm sorry haven't been resolved in my head. So I wouldn't support this motion as it stands. Thanks.
Vice President Stidel, you wish to make a comment?
Yes, President Farmer, thank you. I have some of the same concerns that Director Pearson has already voiced. I appreciate that unless I've understood incorrectly that it had been received from the office, I appreciate that Ms. Webb had read out the letter information to us, but I don't know that we have anything in hand from the current owner of the property. Pardon?
Amanda.
So I
appreciate that, but we don't legally have a piece of paper in our hands.
No, we don't.
Right?
We don't. And just so you know, Vice President Stidel, I did speak to the property owner and to Jesse Arnold, and I don't have documents either. The letter that Ms. Webb read is consistent with the conversation I had with the property owner yesterday, that she's having some trouble getting the properties merged for some reason. I don't know what the hang up is on that, and I appreciate the concerns of you and Director Pearson to have those documents in hand so that we aren't putting ourselves at liability. Perhaps I might suggest that we need to be directing what we're going to do with a transfer agreement and the kinds of terms that'll be in the transfer agreement. And maybe we could direct staff to move forward with that per some kind. I don't know, maybe Mr. Carmel can help out with how we would structure a different kind of motion that would allow staff to move forward with some specific transfer agreement language, and I'm seeing Mr. Carmel.
Sure. I think that's possible. There aren't that many issues that I'm seeing. We know basically the waiver issue, waiver of fees. We know we're waiving administrative fees. You could always waive the installation fees up to an amount specific, so that issue wouldn't just be hanging out there. And then anything in terms of restrictions on use, because as you know, the underlying criteria that you find in 804-100 requires you to establish a reduction in current or future water demand before you can authorize the transfer. So those were the three issues: the ownership issue, the waiver issue, and the restrictions issues. And you can direct staff to bring back a transfer agreement with those issues included.
Okay, if it's acceptable to the seconder of the motion, I would actually then prefer to just direct staff to put together a transfer agreement. Do you need a motion, Mr. Carmel, that it would include the waiver of administrative fees and that kind of thing?
Yes.
Okay.
The three issues we discussed: ownership, a waiver of the administrative fee, and the installation fee, if that's going to happen, and then any restrictions on use.
Okay, so I'd also like to point out that if we can verify that those lots have been merged and therefore development has been retired on the lot where it's being moved from, which I know we don't have anything specific in our ordinance on irrigation meters specifically. However, that is one of the things that we require on residential for moving a residential meter, if I'm not wrong. And that's one of the ways that we say that we're saving water, because they have to merge or retire a lot, right?
Right.
So that was what I was seeking as part of how do we reduce water. Is it's not just that it's not going to be that many gallons a week to water those trees. It's that we're also eliminating some potential buildable lots through the program that we put together, that's kind of called the BRP in some worlds, something else somewhere else. But so then if it's acceptable, Director Howell, I would make a substitute motion.
Question?
Oh, please do.
Before we proceed on the motion?
Yes.
that this might be because it is a different kind of meter than a residential situation, but this is kind of maybe an esoteric question. But if we were dealing with this in a residential meter situation, someone would own a lot that had a meter on it. Now, if they had a parcel next to it that they already owned, and if they sold the meter off of that undeveloped lot, and it was transferred to a new owner, that lot that it was being retired from would have to be retired, and it wouldn't be merged with the contiguous lot of the owner, correct? Because it was being retired, which would mean that it would not be possible for the owner of the lot next to it to extend and potentially build additionally out into that lot that would normally have been retired and not been able to have anything done to it.
That's a really interesting question.
So, I mean, basically what we're doing is we're creating an environment, a specific situation, and providing an exception to a property owner that is not extended to the residential property owners in a residential meter situation.
Okay, so if I have a lot next to me that doesn't have a wait list number and it's not retired, then I can merge it with my property, and then I can therefore make a larger, what do they call that, footprint? Can have a larger mass of a house if I want, because I have more property, correct? So that's allowed, and that's allowed under merging as opposed to moving the meter.
Right.
And I think when I talked to the owner, my understanding was that it was kind of, they understood that that irrigation meter didn't belong to them, but just because they have extra lots next to them, if there were, I don't know how that, if it doesn't have a conservation easement on it, then they can use it for their, and they would have to pay retrofit points if they're adding any fixtures, but it would allow for them to build a larger home if they wanted to.
So, yeah, if all of the things that are normally challenged and the idea of any kind of expansion of a footprint and the concept of additional water being used, I'm just saying we're getting ourselves into a real conundrum with this, and I don't know what the linchpin is on it. It may be what the legality is of the ownership of that meter, because if the meter has ridden with the underlying property legally, then everything that was just discussed is potentially an issue by wanting to put the lots together. Mr. Carmel, your light is on. Is there anything that?
No, I'm just carefully listening in case a question comes up.
Okay.
Mr. Weigold had a question. Did you have a comment, Mr. Weigold?
Yes, for President Farmer, we just at the start of the meeting, we learned that county planning is going to be closed for at least 2 to 4 weeks. So nothing's going to get processed. So if you want us to gather more information on this and bring it up at the next board meeting, that may be appropriate.
Well, considering that there's at least 1 or 2 members of the board right now that aren't comfortable with just moving forward with this item, and that we need to gather a bit more information, that's probably what we need to do. Would that be correct? I think with regard to Director Howell and with regard to Director Pearson. Yes, Director Howell, you have your hand up.
Thank you. I'm not clear. I think that one thing, could we hear the motion as it now exists, because it's gone through a change, and I'd like to hear that. I think what it was something is about instructing.
I move that we approve that we approve the transfer of an irrigation meter and direct staff to put together a transfer agreement with the 3 specific terms outlined by Mr. Carmel to bring back to the board.
Excellent. Excellent. May I include in that one last little thing, a mini amendment, that that included in that be some restriction on the amount of water that can go through that meter, enough to meet green space's needs, but still less than the historical usage, to save us from this one little area where we need to be obeying our code. So we need to be as because we will be challenged on some of this.
Yeah, I agree, Don. We have to meet the code, and the code says we have to use less water. So
yeah, so I think that should be a condition of the transfer. But
how much
less remains to be? It just has to be less than whatever the historical use was.
Right.
Well, that's right. That's the information that we'll need. The records go back 9 years, as far as I know. So the average was 9 units annually. The high was 21. What would you like included as the restriction on use in the transfer agreement?
Sounds like 8.
Or how, I don't know what works. Mary, can we hear from Mary on this one? Mr. Chairman, is that okay? May we ask Mary what would be an adequate amount of water?
Well,
wait. Mary, go ahead and answer that question.
Yeah, you can't. I just don't see how you can restrict the amount of use to the lowest amount of use it's ever used, rather than the highest amount of use it's ever used. It's used 21, so then restrict it to 20. And in fact, in your code that you cited in March 12th, the irrigation meter, municipal code 804030A3, says that such commitments do not have any present or future residential or commercial water service entitlement attached. They do not have EDUs assigned, and they don't include sewer service. So there really aren't any EDUs assigned, and I'm not sure that there is no restriction on any water in town once you have a meter. As much water can go through your meter as you pay for. There's no restriction on commercial meters, of residential meters. Not that we want to use a lot of water, but I don't see where there's any restriction on any meter in town. Once you get a meter, as long as you can pay for the water.
Well, I think we have a...
So the reduction in the water use is the retiring of a lot. So there was another lot through BRP. The whole BRP was invented to retire lots to save water. So there's the reduction right there. And I'm kind of concerned because it just seems like the goalpost keeps on moving. So it would be great to actually get this down in writing, and the staff or the utilities people to go and meet Rick on the property so they can actually see more of what the costs are going to be.
So I'd like to call the question. If you need me to repeat the motion, I can, and then if it goes down, it goes down, and we can move forward with either a different motion or some other direction.
It seemed like Mr. Carmel wanted to make a comment first.
Sure.
No, I'm hoping we get direction with regard to whether we are including a restriction on use in the agreement or not, and the waiver issue, because those are 2 facts we'll need in order to bring back an agreement that can be acted upon.
Okay, so my motion is to transfer the irrigation meter from the property on Pierce Avenue with the APN and to the Creekside Reserve located on Center Street, to waive the administrative fees, and to and all of this is like contingent on whether or not we figure out if Jesse Arnold owns that irrigation meter, which I believe he does. I spoke to him too, but I know I stopped right in the middle of the motion. So the motion is that we authorize transfer and waive administrative fees, and direct staff to put together a transfer agreement that includes... Tim, can you help me out? And we'll talk about what those numbers need to be, but the 3 items are, it has to be...
We'll resolve the ownership issue, and candidly, I'm not terribly worried about that issue. We can resolve it.
Me neither. So, okay.
Waiving the admin fee, that's simple. Waiving the installation fee up to a certain amount of money or not at all, that really has to be resolved, I think. And then whether or not you're going to restrict use, I mean, candidly, that lot's not being retired. If it's merged, it can still be watered upon. It can still be a garden. It will not have a restrictive covenant. That's when a property's been retired. So I don't really consider that as the reduction in water use. So that issue also has to be addressed.
Understood. Now, this has been an irrigation meter. Jesse said that he got it in 1983. My motion is I don't think it's a good idea. My motion ends with, I think we waive the administrative fee. I don't think that there needs to be a restriction. That's why my motion didn't include one. And I don't think that we should pay for the actual cost of putting in the piping. If the board wants to have a certain amount, but that's why I didn't include that either, because I'm thinking about the schoolhouse, and when that connection gets put into place, we don't want to be on the hook for paying for theirs too, out of fairness. If there is a problem with Green Space isn't going to leave Cambria. We know where they are. We can hunt them down if the amount that it costs to install is greater than $2,500. And I think that if we have in the agreement that they agree to pay for the cost of the installation, but we take out the overhead of the administrative cost. I know that's not the ideal answer for Green Space, but it's also not ideal to have the community of Cambria pay out of the property taxes for that installation. So that's why my motion ends at, I believe that we should transfer this and direct staff to put together a transfer agreement that includes the waiving of the administrative fees.
And if we don't have a restriction, we're not going to have a restriction on the amount of water that they use, according to your motion.
They may use it for irrigation only, correct? I mean, they can't put in a toilet. Well, they can't put in a toilet. They can't put in like a bathroom somewhere there and use it. They can't use it as a faucet for drinking water.
No,
Like
it doesn't meet our code then, so I'm going to vote against the transfer. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, that's why I made the motion, so that we can take a vote and either take further action or not.
Okay.
Before we vote, may I make one quick comment, Mr. Chairman?
You're right ahead, Director Howell.
Thank you. Even once the transfer agreement is brought back to us, it could be appropriate at that time before going forward. It might be appropriate at that time to discuss limiting the use. In other words, all we're talking about right now is our intent to transfer this. When we get down to the actual nuts and bolts of the agreement, I think that would be appropriate at that time to discuss any limitations or other things before we actually execute the agreement. So I don't see that as something which we are actually, that is not on the table right now. The only thing that I see on the table is our intent to allow this transfer to go forward, if at all possible.
Is it possible to add language regarding to direct the staff bringing back in a transfer agreement that the determination for usage, any usage limitation would be discussed and decided upon at that time?
I don't see that. Yeah, that's doable.
Yes.
I mean,
We could put a provision in there and leave it blank. You could make your determination then.
Yeah, at least so it's covered, so that we're addressing it, but it may at least address the idea of being able to get the meter transfer taken care of today.
Good.
I believe.
Yeah, I think my motion accounts for that, and the direction that Mr. Carmel has gotten would allow for that. Yes, Mr. Carmel?
Yes.
Okay. So I call the question. Can we have a vote?
I really need to.
So you've made the motion, Director Rice, and there's been some clarifications back and forth and some adjustments. Director Howell, at one point you wish to second this?
Yes, I have seconded it.
Okay. So Ms. Dodson do you have something that you can read out as a motion for us to vote on?
Sure. Director Rice moved to authorize transfer of an irrigation meter from a property on Pierce Avenue to a property on the Green Space Reserve and direct staff to put together a transfer agreement that includes waiving administrative fees. And then Vice President Seidel discussed staff bringing back usage to discuss with the transfer agreement.
Are we actually able to make a vote on that kind of lengthy motion that Ms. Dodson just stated there?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Carmel. If I could just add one comment before we go to the vote. I've talked with Jesse with regard to his property. Director Rice alluded to when he, installed the irrigation meter. And at one point, Jesse moved to San Luis Obispo, and he allowed neighbors nearby to develop a garden there, which, he had done one in the past, obviously on his own. And then he allowed people in the neighborhood to cultivate those grounds as a community garden, so to speak, a neighborhood garden. And then there was some kind of back and forth with regard to personality issues, and so that wasn't pursued. I know there's some question and concern with regard to, will this property be utilized in the future as some type of garden by the people that will that own the property next door? I guess there's always a possibility of cultivating a community garden. And I wouldn't, personally, I wouldn't feel adverse to that. That's something that it would be nice if more of us could do in this community. I just wanted to add that. I hope I wasn't out of line in stating that at this moment in time. So perhaps we can now take a vote, Ms. Dodson.
Sure. Director Rice?
Aye.
Director Howell?
Aye.
Director Pearson?
I abstain.
Okay. Vice President Seidel? Vice President Seidel?
Yeah, I support everything that's going on. The only thing that concerns me is that we're covering all the bases in this. So that's my concern. Yes.
Nay or nay?
President.
President Farmer.
Aye. So I know we're kind of all over the place here, and I feel kind of uncomfortable with the way things have proceeded. And since we're still in regular business and we haven't even done items 5 and 6, why don't we just remain in regular business and move back to item A, which is discussion and consideration to adopt. Well, let me just hand that off to General Manager Weigold with regard to item 7A.
Yes, President Farmer, since we've been in a little over 2 hours, I was going to request a 5 to 10 minute.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I didn't realize. Yeah, I guess we have a little more casual opportunity here to just kind of step away, but you're right. Let's take a 5-minute break. It's right now 4:13. So we will resume the meeting at 4:20. Thank you.
Mute your mic. Mute
he just stepped away for a moment. It appears that everyone else is pretty much ready and willing to continue. Thank you. So sticking with regular business and
with social distancing.
regular business and moving back to item 7A. So General Manager Weigold, could you introduce this item, please?
Yes, President Farmer, item 7A is discussion and consideration to adopt 1-2020, repealing superseded provisions in Article 4 of Title 3 of the Cambria Community Services District Municipal Code relating to refuse and recycling rates. Staff is recommending that the board discuss and consider adopting Ordinance 01-220, which will repeal the provisions in Article 4, Title 3 of the CCSD Municipal Code relating to refuse and recycling rates that have been superseded and are no longer operative. In order to proceed with the ordinance, the board should waive further reading, read by title only, and adopt ordinance number 01-2020. And I'd refer any questions, further discussion with our district council.
Mr. Carmel?
Not much more to say. This is a cleanup ordinance. As you recall, these are the refuse and recycling section of our code that has rates from 2001 that were long ago superseded. So the recommendation is that you adopt the ordinance. The motion would be to adopt an ordinance repealing Article 4 of Title 3 of the Cambria Community Services District Municipal Code relating to refuse and recycling rates and waive further reading.
So does anyone wish to make a motion to adopt this ordinance?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Vice President Steidel. We have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Director Pearson.
Can I clarify, Director Seidel, was that a so moved?
And yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Director, Ms. Dodson, can we?
Sure. Vice President Seidel?
We're getting that feedback again. So someone, let's see, I guess probably the APGs need to be turned off.
They're off.
So we're not getting the, are muted so that we don't get the feedback.
Can you hear me now?
You're fine.
Thank you.
Okay. Vice President Seidel?
Yes.
Director Pearson?
Yes.
Director Howell?
Aye.
And President Farmer? Or Director Rice?
Aye.
And President Farmer?
Aye. All right, that motion has passed, and let's move on now to a regular business item 7C. And once again, General Manager Weigold, if you would introduce this, please.
Yes, President Farmer, agenda item 7C is discussion and consideration of annual review of Board of Director bylaws. The staff is recommending or is advising that the Board Bylaws Ad Hoc Committee is recommending that the Board of Directors discuss and consider the board bylaws and provide direction regarding any changes that they would like to have for adoption. I think I probably should turn this over to the Ad Hoc Committee, if that makes sense for discussion.
Well, let me hand this off to Director Rice, since she did much, if not the majority of the work on kind of not just reviewing, but kind of overhauling the board bylaws. So, Director Rice, go right ahead.
Thank you. I couldn't have done it without. Thank you. I couldn't have Thank you. I couldn't have done it without your help. Can you hear me? Sorry. Sorry, I was having a little technical glitch here. We'll get the hang of this. We'll look back at this meeting and laugh and laugh. So this was supposed to come back last month. It wasn't quite ready. There were a few specific things we still needed to work through related to committees, because these standing committees were not referred to in the bylaws. By way of background, and I'm hoping that everybody did read the staff report, kind of what I talked President Farmer into doing here is to get back on track with an action that we took. I think the ad hoc committee at the time was Director Clift and I, so it was a while ago, where we excised a few of the things that were in the bylaws, intending to put together essentially a board policy handbook, board policies and procedures. So before I leave the board, I would like to try and put some of those things back into writing somewhere, because specifically, and I'm looking here and referring to the chart that is on agenda page 127, about the headings, the bylaws sections. So there used to be a section that was preparation of minutes and maintenance of tapes. That's probably appropriately put into the records retention, which I think is something on the future agenda for the policy committee, is the records retention policy. So we don't need to put it back in here, but I just wanted to note it, because that was the kind of thing we were trying to take out of the bylaws. Also, we removed the correspondence distribution policy, which was about when something comes in for a board member or for the board as a whole, or if it comes in for the GM and CC'd to the board, how are those things distributed? More importantly, board member vacancy, which could have been a humongous help if anybody was around. And I know at the very least, President Farmer and Director Pearson were part of that process. It would have been nice for us to have a set of rules to work from on that. They're also about evaluations and continuing education and ethics training, which the ethics training is state mandated, but the continuing education through CSDA, like the webinar that Vice President Steidel attended yesterday on the Brown Act under the new conditions we're living with, that we want to have in my feeling, the board should have in writing somewhere that we support continuing education for board members also. Those things don't need to be in the bylaws, but they do need to be somewhere. And so there's two, besides the minor changes, there's two things that Director Farmer and I were not quite sure how the board would like to handle it. One is, how do we deal with specifically those 4 sections that used to be in the bylaws and that could be helpful for us going forward, like, for example, the committee replacement. That could have been helped by having the guidelines of how do you do a board member vacancy replacement. And the language is already there somewhere. In fact, I think I included the 2013 bylaws, which have those sections in them. So the policy committee could just crib those into something called the board policy handbook or something, instead of adding them back into the bylaws. The other thing was a bigger question that probably we don't want to deal with today, but is the question of, do we stagger terms for committee members? And we weren't sure if that was something that the board would support or not. I provided language for if we do want to stagger, or if we do want to have a policies manual that is actually referred to in the bylaws, because this is what would have, so I'm sorry, this is a little disjointed. The not being in the same room is a little disconcerting for me. I like to be able to kind of get my surroundings. If the board thinks that it's a good idea for us to have a policy manual, referring to one in the bylaws is a way to ensure that we don't have another situation where we take things out of the bylaws and then don't put them anywhere.
So we say there is a manual. It has these kinds of things in it. We don't even have to do that much. But so those are the two main things. The other changes are fairly minor and can be seen under the summary of revisions. If there's questions, I can answer them. If President Farmer has anything to add. This was reviewed, thank you very much, by Tim Carmel in his office for correctness, both the staff report and the bylaws, so that we weren't doing anything that was outside of what was allowed.
Well, excuse me. Thank you, Director Rice. And we do have two board members that wish to speak. First, Vice President Steidel, and then Director Pearson.
So I apologize. I'm lowering my hand. I'm afraid I had it left on from previously when I was putting out the motion. So I apologize.
No need to apologize at all. Director Pearson.
Yes, thank you. There was one more area that came up at the R&I committee that I think needs to be addressed either in these bylaws or in the standing committee bylaws when we get around to those again, and that is reimbursement of travel and other expenses by committee members. I think it was answered at the R&I committee, but I think it needs to be put into writing on the bylaws of one group or another, so that it's there. So if we could make note of that to have that happen at some point, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Director Pearson, do you mean that we should reimburse committee members or no?
No. What the discussion was at the R&I committee is that no, there should be no reimbursement whatsoever unless authorized by the board. In other words, if we saw something that these committee members would greatly enhance their ability to advise the board, then the board would have to authorize the travel funds up to an amount or something. But I think it just needs to be put in writing as to what we would like to do on that particular issue. Excuse me, either now or next December when the board meets and will review the standing committee. It's like you're staggering the membership of the standing committees. You know, that's another one that probably needs to be in the standing committee bylaws, not in the full board bylaws. But either way, it works.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I want to keep the bylaws as straightforward and simple as possible. I also don't want to lose track of that item, though, because you make a very good point, and having that in writing is kind of critical. Mr. Carmel, do you have any suggestions how we might?
How you might move through this?
Just on the issue of reimbursement and ensuring that something needs to be looked at when we get to the committee bylaws review.
Yeah, I think it's far more appropriate in the committee bylaws. We'll just note it and make sure that we cover it when we get there.
Okay, great. I just, like I said, some of these things fell off the radar because of the drought and everything that was happening, and certain staff members that were on board, certain board members that were on board. I mean, just all kinds of things that ended up happening. I just want to prevent that from happening again, I hope. Let's all be perfect. Are there any other questions that I can answer for other board members?
I do. I see a couple of board members that have their hands up, but it appears as if I have a request to speak here from Ms. Dickinson on this particular item. So, Tina, go right ahead.
Can you, yes, President Farmer, can you hear me?
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay. So my question to the board and to Mr. Carmel, my understanding is that in order for a board member to be reimbursed for travel, lodging, food expenses, that director or directors, up to 2, it can only happen if they've received prior approval from the board prior to the travel time. So say the meeting is March and they have a meeting scheduled for April or May, that they have to receive prior board approval. Then after that, after they've been to the meeting, they have to report back to the public from the meeting. So I'd like to get that clarified, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
I believe that's in the bylaws.
Yep, I believe so too.
It's specifically addressed, actually. It hadn't been. There had been some language missing on that, but we added it in to be sure that it was clear.
Yeah. So my other question is, ad hoc committee, do you want, I'm fine with what you've written up and everything, but are you also asking to form another ad hoc committee to do this handbook to get the rest of that information memorialized?
Actually, that's a very good question, and my suggestion would be to hello, Director Howell, pass the language directly from the bylaws from 2013 to the policy committee to number it appropriately based on the CSDA manual, and just ensure that those sections make sense currently, because they're kind of older. So I wouldn't suggest an ad hoc. I would suggest referring it to the policy committee to deal with those specific items that used to be sections of the bylaws. That's what I would recommend. I think
Great.
that, yeah.
Great. All for it.
As long as Director Howell doesn't have a problem with it.
No problem at all. I don't know what the committee members say, but since I'm the one here, so are you ready to take commentary from the board, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I do. It's not a big deal, Don, but you continue to refer to the board president as Mr. Chairman.
Mr. President, yes.
Nothing to be talking about. As you know, there's no ego attachment. Just protocol and decorum.
Right.
So go right ahead.
I have a number of things, and I'm looking at my watch, and I'm kind of wondering whether we're going to be able to get, this is a rather lengthy thing, and there may be some items for considerable discussion, so I don't know how far we're going to get on this. So let me start by simply asking a couple of questions so I can get clarity, and then see where we go from there. Let me find out the spots here. Okay. All right, on page 134 of the agenda packet, this would be Article 8, Director Compensation. I just want some clarity on the first sentence. $100 for each authorized meeting attended or for each day of service rendered. I don't see what a day of, that's not defined elsewhere. So could you give me some idea as to what the intent was and see if this actually covers it?
So that comes directly from the state law, and the day of it covers. I believe the language is actually directly from state law. Correct me if I'm wrong there. But the day of authorized meetings and days of service. Like you can't count more than one meeting in a day. If you go to 2 meetings in one day, you only get one day. So a meeting, I guess it might be more clear to say for each day of service, but it's yeah. So authorized meeting attended or day of service. So it might not be an authorized meeting. It might be some other thing that the board is authorized for a board member to attend.
Okay. So if it means it's something that the board has authorized the director to do. So for example, the board hasn't authorized me to study the North Coast area plan, right?
Right.
So that's not a day of service, even though I spend all day doing it, right?
Yes.
Just want to get clarity. So it means, I think you should put as authorized for each authorized day of service, because otherwise.
Okay. So for each authorized day of service.
Yeah, something like that, just to make that restriction, because it's otherwise it does sort of imply, well, if I spend all day working on district business, I ought to get paid, well, maybe not, if the board doesn't authorize me to do that, okay. Right. So that would be a clarity and a possible change.
So if I might make note for Ms. Dodson, that would be 8.1 striking.
Just lost you.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, it dropped. Yeah.
I don't know. Can you hear me now?
I hear you good.
Okay. So that we would strike from 8.1 the words meeting attended or for each.
Oh, just each authorized day of service?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's how the code actually reads.
Okay.
Oh, there you are.
There we go.
Okay. There you are. Okay. So moving on then. Again, just where I'm looking for things that need clarity. I have some other more extensive things, but that's not. Oh yeah, here we are. On page 132, Article 5, paragraph subsection 5.3, and then I'm looking down at 6.2, and it looks like a possible contradiction. So again, I would just wanted to hear the subcommittee's thinking about this, because on the one hand, it says once the board of directors takes action, directors should not create barriers to the implementation of that action. Seems very clear. But it also says down here, on 6.2, all members of the board of directors shall exercise their independent judgment on behalf of the interests of the entire district. Now, where I'm having a problem is, let us say that the board takes an action, which I really firmly believe is a disaster to the community. On the one hand, I can't inhibit the action, but does this also mean that I can't go out and speak against it? I just want to know what you're trying to get across here. In other words, does a board member who is in extreme disagreement with a board action, does that board member muzzle themselves completely, or is there some leeway, or how are you guys envisioning this?
Okay, so let me give a concrete example, and it's a concrete example where I am not perfect in how I deal with it. I voted against the loan. Didn't vote against the project at any point, but I did vote against that loan. And I've made it very clear to everybody going forward, I voted against it. I did not get in the way of the implementation of that action by doing things that would have caused us maybe to not get the loan, that maybe would have caused other things, so the district couldn't move forward with the action that the full board took. As an individual, correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, here on any of these things, but my understanding is that as a board member, you don't lose your First Amendment rights, but it's really important to be supporting actions the full board takes, even if you don't individually agree with the action once it's taken. So the authority of the directors to exercise independent judgment on behalf of the interests of the entire district, that's about when you're coming up to a decision. The disagreeing or having your own opinion is about after a decision has already been decided, because when you're in the minority, it sucks. And even if you vehemently, violently, or however you oppose it, gently, whatever, that you really, if you're out there making noise, it does prevent some things, or can cause a kerfuffle with some things. So the idea of being on a board, and I know I spent 4 years as a 4-1 a lot of times, so I'm quite especially a study of one. So keeping that in mind, it is frustrating when you're not on the losing side to have a board member that was there for the vote, part of the discussion when the vote was being made, to then go out, have that person go out and even by talking about it, like, I don't think it's a good idea that we did this, can make it harder for the district to move forward with an action that was taken by a majority of the board. And as individuals, you can say what you want, but we also need the whole board to succeed as a team. Sucks when you have to support something you don't really agree with. I totally get that. It doesn't eliminate your rights as an individual citizen, but it is about, that's why we have discussions, so that we can hopefully come to an understanding of even bad decisions, how that got made by the majority. I mean, that's my thought on it. I don't know if that helps or not. I've also seen board members sue their board in other districts, so, you know.
I do have a related question, but I think Director Steidel might have had her hand raised. I saw her.
Yes, she does.
So I'll hold off on my next question.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Director Howell. To point of the discussion that Director Rice had just given, in my mind, the real term that has to be evaluated is undermine. If for some reason the decision of the board is represented by one or two individuals in an undermining way to the community, then I think that's an issue. You can always have an opinion, but going out of your way to undermine by seeding discord undermines the ability of the board to be able to do its work.
And it sucks to be on the losing side of a vote, but once the vote's taken, as a member of the team, you have to do what you can to support it, even if it's reluctantly.
Oh, absolutely, and I mean that's the way it is in business too. It's you either are going to be a team or you aren't, and you don't succeed by not being a team.
If I may speak briefly, it makes sense. I understand it. I do see that there is something of a gray area here. And let me bring, and this is something which maybe ought to be included in either a policy manual or the bylaws, which we haven't really discussed, which is directors' participation in elections. There was a sitting director.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, we're kind of in the same area. I mean, you can see how it sort of relates. Let's say I'm
I see what you're saying.
I'm a single lone voice, right? And so during an election, I go out and campaign to get some of my other opposing directors diselected. In one sense, I'm doing exactly what I shouldn't be doing, but in another sense, I'm also exercising my First Amendment right.
So that seems like it's outside. The bylaws are about guiding the board's procedures and how we approach and the tone that we want to set for board business. An election, it doesn't become board business until new members are seated. So that's kind of, I see an election as a separate thing. Now, if you were to go out and campaign against one of the directors, I don't think that necessarily creates a barrier to implementing action. A recall might, but I don't think necessarily. It's also important to note that these are guidelines that we're all trying to agree to. It's kind of like a covenant in a way, a similar kind of thing, that we're all kind of agreeing that these are the rules that we're going to operate under as directors. When you're campaigning for somebody who's running for office and you're not running at the same time, to me, that's not really the same as acting as a director. That's acting as a citizen. To me.
Thank you. I just wanted to kind of get the thinking.
I'm gonna bring the SS troops in at you, Howell.
So I guess my only question on that would be whether there needs to be verbiage in the bylaws somewhere speaking something about a director's rights as a citizen, as opposed to their rights as opposed to their obligations as a director. Maybe not, but anyway, I just wanted to raise that issue since I did see kind of a contradiction or possible contradiction there. So thank you. But that might be a subject for future discussion.
Yeah, I definitely think it's something that could be taken up at a future. I hesitate to deal with anything with elections during an election year, even though I'm not running, you know.
Well, that's why I asked, because let us say I'm not running. I will not be running, but do I have to be careful about supporting someone else publicly?
I don't think so.
Because I remember you were expressing that when I was running. So
yeah.
I kind of anyway, we're straying off the topic. Sorry, Mr. Chair, Mr. President.
It's not a problem.
I have some other things, but
Director Howell?
Yeah.
If you would hold up just a moment, please. It's 9 minutes before 5 o'clock. So do I hear a motion to extend this meeting? And of course, we're also having to do closed session here, and I'm a little reluctant to say 6 o'clock. Let's just say 5:30. Well, let's just say 5:30 right now and pray for the best. So do I hear a motion to extend the meeting to 5:30?
So moved.
Seconded.
Ms. Dodson, can we have a quick roll call vote, please?
Okay, Director Howell?
Aye.
Vice President Seidel?
Aye.
Director Rice?
No.
Director Pearson? And President Farmer?
Aye. Director Pearson, was that an aye?
I couldn't tell you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Were they all ayes?
I voted no.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
I hope it's not an inconvenience to continue. So, Director Howell, back to you.
Now I'd like to make a motion. So I would like to move that we table this particular item until our next meeting and give us a chance to discuss it more fully, because I do not see how we can possibly give this the ad hoc committees work very hard. So it's an important subject that requires, I think, deserves more discussion. So I move to table this until our next meeting.
If I might, is there a second on that?
Yeah, I would say. I would say.
I'm not sure.
Oh, there's a second.
Okay.
Where are we?
Did you wish to make a comment, Director Rice?
I was waiting for Director Steidel. Did you have something?
No, go forward, please.
Okay. How many other things are of substantive change do you have, Director Howell? Because, and let me speak to why I don't support waiting another month. We have no idea from hour to hour what's happening, and bylaws are incredibly important, and there's some changes in these bylaws that we will need to rely on potentially in the next few months, including next month. And I would like to see this version put in, and I understand that if there's still considerations that you'd like to go through, maybe we can go through those kind of quickly just to see what they are, and then we can see where we are. Can you just kind of do a summary of where your concerns lie?
Certainly, although my motion wasn't to postpone it till next month, just to next meeting. So yeah. Basically, without going into a lot of detail, I have some. There really is nothing in there about the parliamentary authority for this board, and I think that's important. It isn't important right now because we're all very collegial, but if there was heavy conflict and very controversial matters, I think that we need a very clear set of rules. So I really have some concern there, and I have a paragraph that I'd like to suggest is inserted. Apropos of relative to the subcommittees. There's a verbiage in there which contradicts what's in the bylaws of the various subcommittees, and in particular, what I would like to see actually is that the existing bylaws in this particular matter remain the same, which has to do with the chairman's ability to appoint a subcommittee without having to have the committee act on that. As in the case where something comes up and maybe something needs to be studied, but it isn't, and I've done this before, actually appointed a subcommittee without having to convene the entire standing committee just so I could get two people to work on a project. So I'd like to retain that power, and that's been taken out in the bylaws as they're proposed. There's a statement in there about appointing committee members subject to board approval, and I have some questions about that. And I think the whole issue of how committee members are appointed is probably something that needs a little bit greater discussion. It's been done in at least two different ways during this present incarnation of these committees. So I think that really entails more discussion than what we have time for here. There's another thing, again, regarding the standing committees, the ability of the board to reserve the ability to modify the composition of those subcommittees as those standing committees as they see fit. And I have some issues that they're all related: the appointment of committee members and how those committees are formed, which also, again, then relates also to what you very well brought forth, which is this question as to whether to stagger the terms. And in other words, when these new members should be. So those are the areas that I felt that I would like to have further discussion on.
Okay, so let me make one suggestion on the section on committees, because we wrote it up and then I looked at the committee bylaws. So the inconsistencies there. I think that one way forward would be to approve these. And if you want to make the change, I think about having the committee chairperson appoint people to a subcommittee had more to do with just not having a bunch of ad hoc committees that were decided on by the committee themselves, as opposed to, because they really should be taking direction from the board for what they need to be doing, as opposed to just one board member deciding we need to have a subcommittee to study this. So that was the impetus for that specific one. And one way forward with the section 9 on the committee rules would be to have review of those committee bylaws and just kind of push them together so that they are more consistent, because I realize that there are inconsistencies there. And I agree, there's still a lot of things for how the committees operate that need to be worked out, and that's more appropriate for that section. I just didn't want to be silent on the fact of the committees. I'm okay with taking certain numbers out. I don't know how to refer to them or whatever, but the other issue that you raised about, I think they were all in the committees. There was one other thing that you mentioned.
No, parliamentary authority was the
the parliamentary authority. Yeah, right. So if you look under the, I think it's under the section 5, members of the boards of directors. 5.4 is at the president's discretion, district council shall act as parliamentarian. We could add a sentence there that indicates what set of guidelines that district council should use, but that's why we don't have a specific parliamentary authority referred to here. And I understand, because there's the difference between Rosenberg's and Roberts, and Rosenberg's is often more appropriate for our kind of setting as opposed to Roberts. Does 5.4 address your concern on the parliamentary authority, or you really want to have an additional item?
I would actually like to have additional verbiage, although what's there is excellent, because that is the case in any case where there is a parliament, let us say that I raise a point of order, the chairman is in doubt, can refer that to the parliamentarian. But I still think that there needs to be specified the rules by which we operate, not just leave it up to, what does the lawyer think? Because it behooves each of us to have some awareness of what our rules are. And so let me offer to you, I do have a sentence that I would like to ask to be included, which doesn't materially change the meaning of anything, but does address this. So if I can read it to you, and then find it again. Give me just a second here. There it is. So it's from the existing committee bylaws. It's the rules. Let us do it. If we insert it's 7.1 in the existing standing committee bylaws, but with the following change. I'll just read the whole thing to you. The rules contained in the current edition of Rosenberg's Rules of Order, newly revised, and then parenthesis, and Robert's Rules of Order 11 edition for matters on which Rosenberg is silent, close parenthesis, shall govern the committee in all cases to which they are applicable and in which they are not inconsistent with these bylaws, any special rules of order of the committee or the CCSD board, or that the CCSD board may adopt. And it's kind of an awful sentence, and statutes applicable to the committee that do not authorize the provision of these bylaws to take precedence. Much of that's just directly out of as I say, you have to kind of tear that sentence apart to make it. The main thing, what I wanted to do was focus on Rosenberg, but there are cases, in fact, it's the very cases where we haven't needed guidance in the past, which Rosenberg does not provide, but which Robert's Rules does. And so that's why I would like to have at least, if you don't like Robert's Rules, at least reference Rosenberg. But again, that leaves a great deal to be, it then becomes up to the discretion of the attorney what happens or doesn't happen. So that's I would like to have that sentence included. But did that answer it all? Did
yes.
You understand the sentence? Okay.
Would you agree to just adding a sentence that first part of that sentence on the end of 5.4, so it directs whoever the district council is that's what they should refer to, that Rosenberg's and Roberts where Rosenberg's is silent.
Perfect. That would be fine.
Would that be fine? Okay. So Ms. Dodson, did you get that sentence there on the end of 5.4? And then we can vote, the board can vote if they don't like that. Is there a consensus among the board members? I can only see 3 of you. About Roberts, Rosenberg's?
She accidentally hung up, so she's dialing back in.
Oh, okay. Mr. Carmel, does that work if we just add that language there at the end?
I'm comfortable with it.
Okay.
I would be able to support that. I'm comfortable with it also.
Okay. So, did we have public comment on this item, Mr. President?
Yes, we do have a request to speak on this from Ms. Tina Dickinson.
President Farmer, can you hear me?
We can all hear you. Go right ahead.
Okay. I support Director Howell's concerns regarding this really important item, the bylaws of the district. And I think that they deserve further discussion and consideration. This meeting is already 3 hours past since it started. I do not believe in rushing. And I do not believe this is going very well with Zoom. This is going to be the way going forward for a while. I don't think the matter of 3 weeks is going to make a difference. And I hope that it would not, but I do believe it deserves more consideration by the board before you take action today. or whatever action you decide upon. I think it needs to be tabled until the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. So, do any of the board members have any further comments here before we make a decision whether to hold off on approving this today and addressing the issue again in April? Director Rice?
No, I would just urge us to look at the committee's section when we review the committee's bylaws, so we can be more specific in those rules about the appointment process. And it may be the case that instead of each committee looking at their own bylaws, that we have one review committee for the bylaws so that they stay consistent, so they're consistent across all committees. You make good points on the committee section. We knew it was weak. And I think if we can take those 4 or 5 words out of that one item and add the parliamentarian by Rosenberg's rules to 5.4, then we have some bylaws that aren't perfect, but will be much better placed going forward. And it's not that we can only pick it up in January. If we need to, we can pick it back up. We can approve these now. And if we want to put it back onto the agenda, all we need to do is ask for a future agenda item at a public meeting, or have the president and vice president add it to the agenda, and then we can fix those specific items. But I would urge us to approve this today, with the understanding that they are not perfect and that they may need to be reviewed before next January.
Well, Director Howell, you were the one that seemed to have the most reluctance to move forward and approve this. How do you feel about what Director Rice just said?
I think, given the assurance that we can address this later, so if this is something I feel strongly enough about, assuming I can find somebody to second it on the board.
I won't promise, but I won't promise to, but I will if it's a good motion.
Okay. That being the case, then I would say I'll withdraw did someone second that motion? If they did, if they give it permission.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll withdraw that and let somebody else go.
I move that we approve the bylaws with the 2 specific changes mentioned on 5.4 to add the Rosenberg's Rules of Order and Robert's Rules where Rosenberg's is silent. And the other one was taking just those few words out under the director compensation. Right?
8.1.
8.1.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll second that.
I'll second that. Okay, sorry.
All right, Ms. Dotson, I don't know if you necessarily need to read that back to us. Could you just do a roll call vote, please?
Sure. Director Rice?
Aye.
Director Pearson?
Aye.
Director Howell?
Aye.
Vice President Seidel?
Aye.
President Farmer?
Aye. So, thank you all. And it's 10 after 5 right now. So let's see if we can quickly go through the remainder of this and adjourn the closed session at some point soon. So first, now we're back to item number 5, board member committee and liaison reports. And I'm just going to give a very brief president's report, even though I had much more to say. I just want to remark that it was earlier this month, General Manager Weigold and I shared a phone conversation with Paul Schoenberger, who is the general manager of the Mesa Water District down in Costa Mesa in Orange County. And when he was the president of the board, he was a very congenial fellow, by the way. He's had 25 years of experience in the field of water. And when he was president of the board, their board of directors ultimately developed their strategic plan. And mainly this was, I know that we've discussed maybe doing a town hall meeting. That doesn't seem to be something that we'll be able to even consider doing in the coming months, let's say. So their board of directors ultimately developed their strategic plan, and that was mainly done by the board alone over a 6-month period without public comment, but that's because they have very little public involvement in their board meetings. So I considered, let's just say, we at some point will need to maybe pursue the strategic plan and perhaps maybe do so with the board involvement. And until we can have, a town hall meeting, maybe it would just have to be with a regular meeting, so to speak, and feedback and public comment. But that's kind of open to what the future brings us. Also, I just want to make a brief comment to folks out there in our community that happen to own property, and people that and they have income property with regard to long-term residents, or they happen to have income property with someone that is running a business. You might consider, for people that are really stressed right now economically, that perhaps you consider lowering the rental costs of folks, especially people that maybe have lost their jobs, or their jobs have definitely been downsized with regard to their income, and consider, like I say, lowering the rent, or maybe for at least a month, not having them to have to pay any rent until they have a little bit more financial backing in their life. So I just wanted to make that comment. And now moving on to Ms. Duffield and the Finance Committee report. Oh, excuse me, to Vice President Steidel, pardon me.
No problem. The report that I was going to give was in reference to the committee reporting out on the audit report. So I will finish it at that. One thing for consideration, we could go ahead and do the consent agenda as a single motion and get that off the table immediately, and then curtail our other policy, or there are other committee reports to fit in with the time left.
Well, let's just go on very quickly with the committee reports, and but I appreciate that suggestion. So, did you wish to say anything further with regard to the Finance Committee, or should I just move on to Director Howell and the Policy Committee?
Policy's fine.
Thank you. Director Howell.
Okay. It doesn't look like, can you, there we are. You can hear me, yes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Not much to report, actually. We're just beginning to get back up to our full staff. So we haven't actually met with all 5 committee members for a while. So I'm hoping that I can get them all working on Zoom and we can continue our work. But right now, our coming up meeting is canceled while we figure out what's happening. I would like, actually, it's something that we forgot to do when we were dealing with the bylaws, was the suggestion from Director Rice to pass on to the Policy Committee the job of taking the material which was in the old bylaws and beginning to fashion a policy book. I'd like a little more official guidance from the board on that. I mean, we can go forward with that, but I want to be sure that that is in fact, since we didn't take any vote on it. Is it possible to get some consensus that that is how you would like us to proceed? And I can go with that, but otherwise, I would just kind of continue the way we're going. So I need that direction if you're willing to give it.
I think you know my position.
Yeah, I know your position, but I need to hear from your colleagues here. Mm-hmm. Are we barking up the wrong tree if we embark on that project?
Well, I do think that there's things that can happen with, I mean, we've got a whole list of policies which have no number assignments to them in terms of a configuration that would be able to establish a book within categories. I've been referring to the CSDA and kind of working down through a list, but at least, something that could be considered is taking all of the policies that we have on hand and get the numbering structure established for format and get numbers assigned to the existing policies.
That would be that's the instruction that I think I'm hearing from the board, but I want to be sure that's what I heard.
I think we need to give you some guidance on prioritization of what all this stuff that we're giving you to do. Maybe at our next meeting, we could have a list of all of those things that we've assigned to you, and then we could kind of help you prioritize those a little bit better.
Yes.
Because we are piling on to your committee at this point.
I noticed that, yes. So, yeah, I can do that. In fact, I've already got something. Amanda, I couldn't hear you. Still can't.
The reason I had suggested that it be sent to the policy committee is it's actually a fairly small project since those sections are already in existence. But I definitely hear what the board members are saying about, my main concern is that we have things in writing that we are going to maybe need to rely on, like replacing filling a vacancy. For example, we didn't have a section in the bylaws about having to evaluate the GM every year, and apparently that being in his contract wasn't enough guidance for the board to do it. So that's kind of why I'd like to have those things put somewhere, and I think Director Pearson's suggestion that kind of having that list so that we can help prioritize where the energy might go, if that's comfortable for the rest of the board.
Okay, so I've heard from 3 of you. Anybody else want to? Harry, do you want to talk? Here, I'm chairing this. I'm just trying to get some.
There's no problem, Don. I'm in concurrence with how everyone else is feeling, and like you said, you're a little bit on overload right now, and you've been a little bit short-staffed. So we'll do our best to accommodate the needs of policy while you're feeling a bit challenged at this time.
No problem. So we can go forward with your direction, and I'll give you something at least in the agenda packet. It won't take up a lot of time, a list of everything we're doing and what state it's in and what's been assigned, and go from there.
Thank you, Director Howell.
Thank you.
Moving on to the Resources and Infrastructure Committee report, and Director Pearson.
Okay, I will try to keep this as brief as possible. We formed an ad hoc committee for off-site storage as directed by the board. The videos are still a work in progress, and we'll get those to you at some future date. We have a revised CIP list coming available in April that will give you a better idea as to what projects have been worked on, what ones are complete, and what ones are budgeted. We've got color coding on that. We will have those available at our April meeting. And the last one that we discussed that I was hoping to hear from the general manager or the utility manager on was the consultant for the UWMP and where we are on that one. So maybe we can get a little update from Mr. Weigold on that. Otherwise, that's my report.
Thank you. Mr. Weigel, General Manager Weigel, did you just wish to make any comment?
Not on that subject, but I'll ask the district engineer if he has anything to add on that subject.
Mr. D'Enzo, by the way, where are you at right now with the moon over your shoulder there?
Can't hear you, Ray.
Okay, yeah, hi. I'm here at Lake. No, I'm kidding. I'm experimenting with backgrounds at the moment. I did talk with the let me see. I did talk with the consultant about the price, the cost, and the scope of work, and we're still in the process of trying to parse out the actual UWMP portion from the CDP portion because it's really difficult to separate the two. But I'll have something for you very shortly, like next week. So.
Thank you, Ray. Ms. Dickinson, did you wish to make a public comment on the R&I committee report?
Yes, I would. Earlier, I heard Mr. Hank Krichik from San Simeon request some information regarding a meeting that took place. And I heard that I heard you, President Farmer, say that you or General Manager Weigold could report on that. I don't believe we've heard anything yet.
Well, I have that coming up that I'll be reporting on. I'm sure Mr. Weigold, General Manager Weigold, might wish to comment as well as perhaps Director Pearson, but I was going to remark on that. I haven't forgotten. Okay. All right. So moving on to, now I see it's 5:21. We still have, a few brief items here and closed session. So do I hear a motion to continue the meeting until 6 o'clock? Do I hear a motion to continue this meeting and into closed session until 6 o'clock?
So moved. We're both. I'll second then.
Thank you. Haley, could you do a quick roll call?
Sure. Director Pearson?
Aye.
Vice President Seidel?
Aye.
Director Howe?
Aye.
Director Rice? President Farmer?
Aye. Right, moving on to other liaison reports. David, do you have anything from a Fire Safe Focus Group?
Yes, just briefly. Well, we continue planning for a May 16th preparedness day, but with what's going on, that may be put off until fall. Otherwise, everybody should be filling out their surveys that they got from the young lady at Poly that were in the bills that were sent out this week. I did mine. I hope everybody's doing theirs. That's all I've got.
All right, thank you. And I believe there was no NCAC meeting. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Correct. Yeah.
Thank you. So my apologies. Possible and remove three quick items here. First off, the Forest Committee. The most important thing that was discussed at the Forest Committee, other than the planting of trees and Space recently circulated a letter that was critical of the understory removal on the Fiscalini Ranch that took place last year. And there are a number of signatories to that. And both Dan Turner and Alan Peters from CAL FIRE and Dan Turner from the Fire Safe Council, they pointed out that this letter was filled with many inaccuracies and factual misstatements, including claims that CAL FIRE violated state law. So this has gone back to Green Space for their consideration, and we'll see how this evolves. But that took up a majority of discussion of that meeting. With regard to FFRP, which I didn't attend, but due to the flu, but Board President Mark Larson gave me these notes. Just a couple of things. First off, the Wildflower Show, which is a fundraiser for FFRP, probably not going to be taking place at the end of April at the Vets Hall. And also Carlos Mendoza from Facilities and Resources reported that some additional encampments were cropping up on the ranch, and that the impact of removing these encampments is causing these homeless folks to reappear elsewhere around town, including in parking lots. With regard to the report on the meeting that took place, it was online. It was supposed to take place in Bruce Gibson's office, but we all basically called in. So let me just tell you the people that were at this meeting first. Of course, Supervisor Gibson, Board President Gwen Kellis from San Simeon, as well as Charlie Grace, their general manager. David Pearson was there, our director, John Weigold, our general manager, as well as myself, and also from the Regional Water Quality Control Board. And this was in addition, previously in the first two meetings, no one from regional was in attendance, but this time John Robinson, Harvey Packard, and Matt Keeling were in attendance. So the first thing that happened was Bruce Gibson, kind of called the meeting to order. The first topic was the possibility of brine disposal. In other words, the brine from our water facility to San Simeon's outfall. So both Charlie and Gwen made a number of comments. Mostly, let me just make these remarks here. Gwen said she didn't feel that it was currently a good solution to merge with the Cambria CSD. She didn't feel that the outfall, using the outfall for brine, would ultimately be approved by the Coastal Commission because of the Monterey Bay Marine Sanctuary, as well as the Cambria Marine State Park. They were also concerned about the debt that our CCSD currently incurs on a yearly basis, and they saw no advantage to merging in any way, shape, or form with the Cambria Community Services District. A little bit further on, obviously, both Supervisor Gibson and members of the Regional Water Quality Control Board, especially Mr. Keeling, tried to encourage. They said that they understood the concerns of the San Simeon CSD, but they alluded to the fact that right now ocean outfall was seen as a favorable solution in many areas along the coast of California, not just here in San Simeon or Cambria, and that brine disposal could be less complicated, less problematic than San Simeon was seeing this issue. At one point, Matt Keeling said that he felt that this would be doable, that San Simeon had a short-sighted perspective on the situation, and doing away with the ocean outfall was not good strategy. At one point, our general manager, Weigold, said that he wished to seek short-term solutions with the San Simeon Community Services District. I voiced my concern with regard to using ocean outfall and polluting the oceans around us, since we're already doing. So we will be having another meeting in the future, probably in a couple of months, with regard to this item. General Manager Weigold, Director Pearson, would you wish to add anything else to this?
Nothing from me, President Farmer.
No, I think you covered it fine, Harry. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Director Rice, you wish to make a comment?
I'm confused where San Simeon might have gotten the idea that we wanted to merge with them, since that was not part of what we were trying to do under my understanding. My understanding was we were trying to get a win-win situation for them and for us. We're not trying to take them over or merge with them, so our debt it shouldn't be there.
Yeah, Amanda, it was a poor choice of words by Ms. Kellis, I think.
Okay. Okay.
They were talking about swapping fluids and so.
It is getting late, so anything is possible to be referenced at this point in time. But let me just say this: the original discussion with regard to this was doing the dual pipeline, to where San Simeon sent their wastewater to our wastewater facility, and we sent our brine to their facility to use as ocean outfall. So that was the merging, so to speak, in that regard.
I see. Okay. I'm glad it didn't get off track there. Thank you for that clarification.
I believe, well, at least that was the initial approach. So
I also think that it's important to note that a single director's opinion, like whether I think it's a good idea or you think it's a good idea or a bad idea, is not as important as the experts who are hired and pay close attention to whether or not we're polluting and would not give us a permit if they thought that we were going to do damage either to the ocean or to the creek. I think they've made that very clear at the regional board. So I think that although the report doesn't sound great, it sounds like that it might be technically feasible if we can get through the political marsh.
Well, right. Let me just say this. I'll just add this one more thing, that obviously San Simeon appears quite reluctant at this point in time to accommodate Cambria with regard to the brine waste going out in the ocean outfall. But at the end of the meeting, Ms. Gellis did, share email addresses with Mr. Keeling, so they will obviously be in further discussion, I would think.
Okay, I would also note that one director on their board also shouldn't be deciding, I'm just saying.
Okay, well, John Russell, who is a director who has participated in the first two meetings, he wasn't there. So it was just President Kellis and General Manager Grace who were representing them. Okay, so moving on to the consent agenda, and I know that Elizabeth Bettenhausen, she asked if Ms. Duffield would reference the expenditure report on page 21 with regard to the David Keith Consulting, the $11,000 item. Could you do that, Ms. Duffield? Ms. Duffield?
Yes. So actually, that's a better question for our utilities manager to answer. I can only relate to what is on, what the contract is for and what we paid for services for the date range. But if you're really wanting to know exactly what the consultant did during that time frame, it's a better question for General Manager Weigold or the utility manager, Mr. D'Enzo.
Would either one of you wish to address that? Go ahead, Mr. D'Enzo.
Okay, yeah. So there are two things that were on that invoice. It amounted to about $11,000. There were two items. One of them was an update to the groundwater model, and basically a groundwater model to compare with the findings that they had from a while back. So that was the one portion. The other portion too is the 5-year engineering report that we needed to submit to the state water board. Typically, I was only here for a week when that issue came up, so we had to have them do it. Normally, I would be doing a report like that, but it was those two items that totaled to about $11,000.
All right. Well, hopefully that's a satisfactory response for Ms. Bettenhausen. I don't believe she's tuning in. Thank you, Ray. Do I have do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Wait, President Farmer, I have my hand up. I have a couple of questions on the minutes.
Pardon me, Director Rice.
I'm sorry. I'm looking at page 39 at the bottom. This is a question for staff and policy committee, I guess. So we passed the policy 1042. Have we added that in number to the policy handbook? I don't know whose job it is to do that. So I don't need an answer right now, but we need to follow up because we need to be putting these ones as they get approved. They need to be compiled. The other one is on page 41. It says motion passes unanimously, and then there's 0 ayes, 0 nays, 0 absent. Because we moved to make no nomination, and there was a motion and a second, but then there's no vote count. Because it says that everybody voted yes on page 41 at the top.
Yeah.
Do you see that?
So, Ms. Dodson, we can make that correction at some point?
Yeah, I do see that. We can make that change. We can remove the reference to that motion. And also to your other comment regarding the policies, after those policies were approved, I did put them in the correct format and they've been posted to the website.
Thank you very much for that answer. I think we just need to have it just say ayes 5 because it says below there, ayes are everybody. So if we could just change that number on there, that would be helpful. And I am, other than that, I'm good.
Yeah, I can.
So we're moving on now to.
Wait, we still have to take a vote on the consent agenda. And
thank you.
I have some other corrections to the minutes. Is it appropriate to do that before we vote? Page 37, Policy Committee's report. A second paragraph is a typo. He proposed board consider changing Policy Committee name to Policy Research Committee, or it's as is written, search and evaluation. It should be research and evaluation. Okay, so that needs to be changed. And on page 36, item C, the utilities report, second paragraph, there's a suggestion by Director Rice, and it's not correctly set out here. As it reads, Director Rice suggested the board approve the intent to serve list process for existing structures. What Director Rice actually said was that we should be examining any kind of a thing that required retrofits. So it's entirely different. So the meaning here is not correct. Director Rice, do you remember what you said on that one?
I'd have to go back to it and listen to it.
That needs to be correct because that is definitely wrong. And what it really is a suggestion for a future agenda thing, or should be. So it should be documented in here with the correct wording. So that could be done later, but it needs to be.
Can we pull?
Excuse me, Director Rice.
Just pull the whole, pull the minutes, and we'll do it next time. You want to do that? Let's do that. And I'll go over the correction, and we can do it next meeting.
Is that going to be your suggestion, Director Pearson?
Yes.
Thank you.
Good. All right. So I'll talk to Haley, give her my corrections. I see everybody nodding, except Cindy, who's at the phone. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. So with regard to the consent agenda, we're adopting the expenditure report for February. So can we have a roll call on that, please? Ms. Dodson?
Okay, Vice President Seidel?
Yes.
Director Howell?
Yes.
Pearson?
Yes.
Director Rice?
Aye.
President Farmer?
Aye. So now, and excuse me for being a little bit distracted. I get a little bit shaky in the late afternoon sometime. So with regard to future agenda items, a couple of things I want to mention. First off, we were kind of got involved with the strategic plan and how we were going to pursue that. And I'm afraid I neglected early on in the year to bring to the board the goals and objectives for 2020. So I know it's a little bit late, but I'd like to put that on the agenda for April's meeting. And with regard to the singular April's meeting, when we had the agenda meeting yesterday, we decided that there would only be one meeting in April, and that would be on April 16th. And it seems like the agendas will, both agendas combined for the 9th and the 16th, they were rather short singularly, so we decided we would try to do them in one meeting, considering we're in new ground now with regard to running meetings. So I hope everyone is happy with that. So with that being said, does anybody wish to make any further comment before I adjourn this meeting to closed session?
I do.
Director Rice.
I would very much like for the district to call an emergency meeting, the president and the vice president call an emergency meeting so that we can address issues related to coronavirus, the new information that came up. I didn't want to have this on today's agenda, which we could have put it on the agenda as an emergency item because of the declaration was so close to today's meeting by the county of the shelter in home. I think it's incumbent upon us, since this isn't a city, to provide some direction both for our staff and for the community. And I very much hope that we can call an emergency meeting, perhaps to declare an emergency declaration, so that it will make it easier to do things that we need to do to help the community of Cambria, that we can do, that are within our authority. And I just urge the president to consider doing that in the next few days and not wait even a week, because things are changing rapidly, but there are many things we could be doing right now.
Well, Director Rice, then briefly following up on that, what do you feel those might be?
So what I'd like to do, instead of taking time right now to do that, I'm happy to meet with you and have a further discussion on that. I just want to urge us to see if the board has any interest in having an emergency meeting and declaring it an emergency, which would then give the district some additional flexibility that may be needed to do things like, I don't know, help residents who currently aren't working get their water bill paid without having to pay late fees and such, because there's going to be a lot of stress around a lot of things. That's just one small example. We also could declare which things are essential for the district to do, because as you said, the county planning office is closed for 2 to 4 weeks. We don't know how long. So we need to really be looking at what we need to be doing right now, because I'm sorry to say, this is, you know, everything you do before an emergency seems like you're overreacting, but you'll never be able to convince people you weren't overreacting when things don't get bad. Because you were acting out of extra caution, took extra extreme measures, so things didn't get bad. But things could go really bad if we underplan or underreact. So I just would urge us to move forward with taking steps that will protect the residents of Cambria.
General Manager Weigel, do you have any comments with regard to what Director Rice just stated?
Right now, I think, you know, we're working through a lot of the issues. They're operational in nature. You know, the biggest issue we have is how to handle cash transaction for payment of water bills. But finance director, manager, and I are working through that, and we'll come to the board if we need further guidance.
Mr. President, can we get a whether there's even interest in any from any other directors? Because I could be the only one that thinks this is a step we should be taking, and if that's the case, I'm okay with dropping it.
Well, I would say this, Director Rice. I think, you know, I wouldn't dismiss what you've said, especially because, you know, we have an elderly community here. And folks in our town, whether they have a lot of money or, as you say, some folks on very limited income right now that might even be more challenged, there's probably going to be a little bit more anxiety in our community as a result. So I don't think that you're.
So I'm trying to get some whether there's interest among the other board members to take that course of action.
So, Director Howell.
Thank you. I'm not, can you hear me? It's,
Go right ahead.
Yes, I think I see no harm in it. I think if using this format, if we can address the problem of how the public can participate in a way so that we don't have to keep the Vets Hall open, I think that the overhead of these meetings is much less than a regular meeting, and we don't have to leave the comfort of our homes and we have these conversations. So I see no reason not to do it. I think we might discover that we don't have that much to talk about, in which case no harm done. But if we do, it's just as well. So I see no harm in it. I'm certainly not going anywhere. I don't think any of us are. So we might as well use this opportunity to maybe use it to good end. If we can, this is really more for council, is whether we can meet the appropriate requirements of the Brown Act, the modified Brown Act, if the public can only perhaps either listen to us or talk to us by phone, so that we don't have to have some physical place open for them to go. That way staff just can stay home and work from there. If those issues can be solved, I think that yes, we should definitely consider having an emergency meeting. The overhead would be so little, there would be no reason not to.
Let me address that quickly. Yes, on the 17th, the governor did another declaration that eliminated the requirement to have a live place for public comment. So we can do this all electronically now.
Excellent. Now we just have to figure out just how to do it. So that we don't keep dying on us. Yeah.
Director Pearson, do you wish to make any further comments?
I think it's a good idea. The CERT and CERT people and the fire chief are working on a project that they might give us a report on at that emergency meeting that deals with some things they're considering to do and probably trying to move forward. So yeah, if you put that on the agenda for that meeting, that would be good.
Vice President Steidel?
Yes, I would support a meeting of that kind. I think that, for instance, the information that Director Pearson just referenced would probably be of real value because the control point in terms of authority for being able to do certain kinds of things probably resides in the fire chief arena and the arena that he operates within. I think that those things are potentially very different than the checklist of need tos for the district as a water and wastewater source. I think that the things that the district needs to have on its to-do checklist and priority is different than what was described by Director Pearson, but I think we need to be aware of all of those and determine which one of those the district needs to insert itself into, that they have the authority and influence to be able to make a contribution.
So perhaps in the next day or two, I'll make an effort to connect with all members of the board to see what time is convenient in the near future to have this special so-called emergency meeting, and then we'll move forward. Does that sound okay to everyone? All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Seeing no future agenda items, and we'll now adjourn to close session. I want to thank everybody for their patience and this first opportunity to work through Zoom. I want to thank everyone who is from the community who has hung in there online and listened to us and made comments that they have. And we'll now adjourn to closed session. And let me ask, is there anyone out there in the audience right now that wishes to make a public comment on our closed session items? Seeing none, I'm adjourning this meeting to closed session, and we'll see you all back here in a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Agenda item 9.
So for the board, for the closed session, you should all log out of this meeting, leave the meeting, and then click on the other invitation to join a new Zoom session for the closed session.
I guess I should have, I don't know why I assumed everybody knew that, but thank you.
Just in case.
Thank you.
Okay, all right.